The stagecoach wheels ground to a halt against frozen mud, sending a spray of ice crystals into the bitter February air. Clara Malone gripped the worn leather handle beside her seat, steadying herself as the vehicle swayed one final time. Through the frost-covered window, she could make out the weathered buildings of Ash Bluff, their unpainted boards gray as winter sky. End of the line. Miss. The driver called down, his voice muffled by the wool scarf wrapped around his face. This here's Ash Bluff. Clara gathered her traveling cloak tighter around her shoulders and reached for her canvas valise. Everything she owned packed into that single bag. At 32, she'd learned to travel light. Too many quick departures from positions that hadn't worked out. Too many towns where she'd been told she was too forthright for a lady's temperament. She stepped down from the coach, her boots sinking into the churned snow. The wind hit her immediately, sharp as broken glass, carrying the scent of wood smoke and something metallic copper from the mines. Perhaps she'd read about Ash Bluff's copper veins in the advertisement that had brought her here. Mrs. Harriet Blackwood, wealthy widow, seeking educated governess for daughter aged 12, room, board, and generous wages. References required. Clara had excellent references. 3 years with the Markhams in Denver, 2 with Judge Morton's family in Santa Fe. She was accomplished in French, mathematics, and piano. She could teach watercolors and proper penmanship. What the references didn't mention was why those positions had ended always some variation of the same story. Too independent, too quick to speak her mind, unsuitable influence on impressionable young ladies. The stagecoach driver tossed her valise down, and it landed with a soft thud in the snow. "Lady at the postal office can direct you where you need to go," he said, already climbing back to his perch. "We leave again Thursday morning, if you're needing to know." Thursday, 3 days from now. Clara nodded her thanks and watched the coach lumber away, leaving deep ruts in the street. Around her, Ash Bluff revealed itself in the fading afternoon light. A single main street, buildings pressed close together as if huddling for warmth. The Copper-Crown Saloon, its painted sign swinging in the wind. Holbrook's General Goods, a small hotel with boards nailed over 2 of its windows. She straightened her spine, a habit formed from years of maintaining proper posture in other people's parlors, and walked toward the postal office, her brown wool dress, practical and unfashionable, collected snow at the hem. She'd chosen it deliberately. Governesses shouldn't draw attention. The postal office occupied a narrow building wedged between a blacksmith's shop and what appeared to be a doctor's office, though the shingle was so faded she could barely make out the letters. A bell jangled overhead as she pushed open the door. Inside, a thin man with pomaded hair looked up from sorting mail. His eyes traveled from her snow-dusted bonnet to her sensible boots, cataloging, assessing. "Help you, miss?" "I'm looking for the Blackwood residence," Clara said, setting down her valise. "I'm expected. Miss Clara Malone, the new governess." The man's hand stilled on the letters. Something shifted in his expression. Was it pity? "Blackwood, you say?" "Mrs. Harriet Blackwood. She hired me to instruct her daughter." He set down the mail and came around the counter, wiping his hands on his apron. "Miss, I'm afraid there's been some confusion. The Blackwoods left Ash Bluff near about 2 months ago." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Clara's feet. "Left?" "Mr. Blackwood, that is. Mrs. Blackwood's late husband's brother came out from Chicago. Some dispute about the estate, the mine shares. Took them back east with him, sudden-like. The house has been shuttered since November." Clara gripped the edge of the counter. 2 months. The letter hiring her had been dated December, after they'd already gone. Did they leave any word, any forwarding address?" The clerk shook his head. "Nothing for a Miss Malone. I'm certain. I'd have remembered." He glanced at her valise, understanding dawning. "You've come a long way." Denver, she managed. 4 days by stage, her savings depleted for the fare. Well now. He shifted uncomfortably. That's a hard piece of news to deliver. The hotel might— Thank you. Clara cut him off. Years of maintaining composure in difficult situations serving her now. She would not let this man see her desperation. I appreciate your assistance. She picked up her valise and walked back into the cold, the bell's cheery jingle mocking her exit. Outside, the wind had picked up, driving snow in horizontal sheets. She stood for a moment, considering her options. The hotel would want payment in advance. She had $3.40 to her name kept back for emergencies, though she'd imagined those emergencies would come after she'd secured her position. Not before. Her return ticket to Denver, if she could even purchase one, would cost more than she had, and return to what she'd given up her boarding house room, told everyone she was taking a position out west. Clara forced herself to walk, one foot in front of the other, though she had no destination in mind. The good citizens of Ash Bluff hurried past, heads down against the wind. A woman in a fur-trimmed coat gave her a curious glance but didn't stop. Two miners, their faces grimed with copper dust, touched their caps as they passed. She paused outside the copper-crowned saloon, warmth and yellow lamplight spilling from its windows. Through the glass, she could see men gathered around tables, smoke rising from their pipes. For a wild moment, she considered going in, finding work of a different sort, but no, she'd starve before she'd sink to that. She had her education, her accomplishments. She was a governess, not a saloon girl. But what good was education when there were no children to teach? The church at the end of the street drew her attention. Perhaps the minister, but no, she'd tried that before. In Colorado Springs, ministers' wives tended to look askance at unmarried women over 30 who appeared on their doorsteps seeking charity. Clara's fingers were growing numb inside her kid gloves. She needed to make a decision soon, before the daylight failed entirely. The general store might allow her to warm herself while she thought, but she couldn't linger there indefinitely without making a purchase. She was studying the hotel again, calculating whether her remaining funds might secure her even one night's shelter, when she noticed a handwritten sign in the window of the newspaper office, "Help wanted, inquire within." Her heart lifted slightly. Perhaps she could earn enough for a few nights' lodging while she determined what to do next. She crossed the street, nearly slipping on a patch of ice hidden beneath fresh snow. The newspaper office smelled of ink and tobacco. A man in his shirt sleeves, garters holding up his cuffs, looked up from a printing press. About the position, Clara began. "Can you set type?" he asked without preamble. No, but I can learn. I'm educated. I can read and write." "Need someone who can set type today, now." He turned back to his press. "Try the laundry. Mrs. Chen might need help." "Dismissed." Clara retreated to the street once more. The laundry. She'd supervised the washing of fine linens. Yes, but she'd never done the work herself. Still, what choice did she have? But the laundry was closed. A sign in Chinese and English announcing the proprietor would return Monday. 3 days away. Clara stood before the locked door, her valise growing heavier with each passing moment. "You waiting on Mrs. Chen." Clara turned. A young woman, barely out of her teens, stood behind her. Despite the cold, she wore only a thin shawl over her dress. Her cheeks were rouged, her hair arranged in elaborate curls. "I was hoping to inquire about work," Clara said carefully. The girl laughed, not unkindly. "Honey, she's got her daughters and her daughters-in-law. She don't hire out." The girl looked Clara up and down, taking in her respectable dress, her straightened spine. "You're that governess, aren't you? The one supposed to work for the Blackwoods?" News traveled fast in a town this size. "How did you—" "Jimmy at the postal office told Bert at the saloon. I heard it serving drinks." The girl pulled her shawl tighter. "Tough break. They say Mrs. Blackwood was half-cracked anyway, fighting with her brother-in-law over money that wasn't there." Mine played out 2 years ago." "I see," Clara said, though she didn't. Not really. "You got a place to stay?" the girl asked. "I'm making arrangements." The girl's expression softened. "The hotel won't take you without cash up front. Mr. Holbrook at the general store might let you sleep in his storeroom if you offer to help his wife with the inventory. She's been poorly." It was kindly meant advice from an unexpected source. "Thank you, Miss—" "Just Dolly." She gave Clara another appraising look. "You could do well at the Crown. You know, refined lady like you. Men pay extra for class." "I don't think—" "No, I suppose not." Dolly sighed. "Well, good luck to you. Gets mighty cold once the sun sets." She walked away, her thin-soled shoes making delicate prints in the snow. Clara watched her go, then picked up her valise once more. The general store. Perhaps Mr. Holbrook would be sympathetic. But Mr. Holbrook, when she found him, was arguing with a supplier about a delayed shipment. His wife was nowhere to be seen. Clara waited 20 minutes, her feet numb, before giving up. The sun was setting now, painting the snow-covered mountains purple and gold. Beautiful, if one had leisure to appreciate it. Clara had no such luxury. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and her traveling cloak, adequate for the coach, was no match for a night in the open. She found herself back where she'd started, in front of the postal office. The clerk was locking up for the evening. Miss Malone. He seemed surprised to see her still on the street. "Haven't you found lodging?" Pride warred with desperation. Desperation won. "I find myself in some difficulty. The position I traveled here for no longer exists, and I lack funds for the hotel. Is there perhaps a charitable organization, or—" "There's the church, but Reverend Mills is visiting the mining camps this week. Won't be back till Sunday." The clerk finished locking the door, then paused, seeming to wrestle with himself. "There's one place might take you in without payment up front, but it's not, well, it's not what a lady like yourself might be used to." "I'm willing to work for my keep," Clara said quickly. "It's not about the work. Reed Kerrigan runs the stage stop and stable at the edge of town. He's got a loft space above the stables. He's let folks stay there before when they were in trouble. But he keeps to himself. Rough sort, not improper, mind you," he added hastily. "Just not social. Lost his place in the war. Came out here to forget, I reckon." A stable loft. Clara had slept in her share of modest accommodations, but never a stable. Still, it was shelter. "Could you direct me there?" The clerk pointed down the street. "Follow Main to the end. Turn left at the old mine shaft marker. Big barn. Can't miss it. Painted red, though the paint's mostly worn off now." "But, Miss—" He hesitated again. "Maybe wait till morning. Try the church again. Surely someone—" "Thank you," Clara interrupted. "You've been very helpful." She could feel him watching as she walked away, probably thinking her foolish or desperate or both. He wasn't wrong. The stable stood apart from the main cluster of buildings, a massive structure that had indeed once been red. A small office was attached to one side, lamplight glowing in its window. Clara could hear horses moving in their stalls, the comfortable sounds of animals settling for the night. She knocked on the office door. No answer. She knocked again, harder. "It's open." The voice came from inside the barn itself. Clara pushed through the main doors into relative warmth and the rich scent of hay and horses. Lanterns hung at intervals, creating pools of golden light. A man emerged from one of the stalls, wiping his hands on a rag. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' growth of beard. His clothes were work-worn but clean. He stopped when he saw her, wariness flickering across weathered features. "Help you, ma'am." "Mr. Kerrigan. My name is Clara Malone. I've just arrived in town. and I find myself in need of accommodation. I was told you might have space available." He studied her for a long moment, taking in her respectable dress, her straightened spine, her valise. "You're the governess, the one who came for the Blackwood position." Was there anyone in this town who didn't know yes? "And they're gone." "So I discovered." He went back to wiping his hands, though they appeared clean already. "I've got a loft space. It's not fancy. Gets cold at night. No proper furniture. Just a cot and a trunk." "I'm not in a position to be particular about amenities, Mr. Kerrigan." Something that might have been amusement crossed his face. "No, I suppose not. Can you pay—" Here was the moment of truth. "Not immediately, but I'm seeking employment. I could help with the stable work in the meantime. Or cooking, or—" "I manage fine on my own." Clara felt her last hope slipping away. She gripped her valise tighter, knuckles white inside her gloves. "I see. Thank you for your time." She turned to go, already wondering if she could survive a night in one of the abandoned buildings she'd noticed. Then, "Wait!" She looked back. Reed Kerrigan was studying her again. Something unreadable in his expression. "You ever tend horses?" "I've ridden. I know the basics of care." "Cooking?" "Yes." A half-truth. She could manage simple meals, though she'd always had kitchen staff before. "The stage comes through 3 times a week. Passengers need food, coffee. Horses need tending while they rest. I could use help on those days." He named a wage that was less than half what she'd have made as a governess, but it was something, plus the loft space and meals. "I accept," Clara said immediately. He nodded once, then jerked his head toward a ladder at the back of the barn. "Up there. I'll bring you a lantern and some blankets. There's a pump out back for water, privy behind the office. We start work at dawn." "Thank you." The words seemed inadequate. This taciturn stranger had just saved her from a night possibly more in the cold. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "You haven't seen the accommodations." He was right. The loft was Spartan in the extreme, a cot with a thin mattress, a wooden trunk, hooks on the wall for clothing. Wind whistled through gaps in the boards, but it was dry, and the heat from the horses below provided some warmth. Reed appeared with blankets, a pillow, and a small oil lamp. He set them down without comment, then paused at the ladder. "Ash Bluff isn't an easy place for a woman alone," he said, "especially one with education and refinement. You might do better to wire whatever family you have. Ask for funds to return home." "I have no family to wire," Clara said quietly. "This will suit me fine, Mr. Kerrigan." He studied her for another moment, then nodded. "Breakfast is at 5. We'll see how you manage." Then he was gone, leaving Clara alone in the lamplit loft. She sat on the cot, testing its stability, and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of her situation. Stranded, nearly penniless, about to begin work as a stable hand and cook, but alive, sheltered, employed, after a fashion. Clara unpacked her few belongings, hanging her spare dress on one of the hooks, placing her books she'd brought 3, foolish optimism in the trunk. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tonight, she had a roof over her head and the promise of work. She prepared for bed, shivering as she changed into her nightgown. The cot was hard, the blankets rough, but she'd slept in worse during her travels between positions. As she turned down the lamp, she could hear Reed moving below, talking softly to the horses as he finished the evening feeding. A strange man, a strange situation, but then her life had been full of both. Clara closed her eyes and listened to the wind howling outside, grateful for the thin walls that stood between her and the winter night. Tomorrow, she would begin again. It wouldn't be the first time. Clara woke to the sound of horses stirring below and the faint gray light of pre-dawn filtering through the loft's gaps. For a moment, she couldn't place where she was the unfamiliar cold, the smell of hay and leather. Then memory returned Ash Bluff, The vanished position. The stable loft. She dressed quickly, her fingers stiff with cold as she buttoned her brown wool dress. 5 o'clock, he'd said. Through the floorboards. She could hear movement. Reed was already at work. She climbed down the ladder, careful of her skirts, and found him filling water buckets from the pump. He glanced up at her arrival, but said nothing, simply nodding toward the small office attached to the barn. Stoves lit. Coffee should be ready. The office was cramped but warm, dominated by a desk covered in papers and ledgers. A pot-bellied stove radiated heat from one corner. On its top, a blackened coffee pot steamed. Clara found tin cups on a shelf and poured 2 cups, the coffee thick and bitter as tar. Reed entered as she was examining the meager supplies in a crate near the stove: cornmeal, beans, salt pork, dried apples. "Stage comes through at 10, he said, accepting the coffee she offered. "Usually 4 to 6 passengers, sometimes more. They'll want a hot meal." "What do you typically serve?" "Whatever's on hand. Beans, biscuits if there's time." He studied her over the rim of his cup. "You said you could cook." "I can." She'd watched kitchen maids often enough. How difficult could it be? "How many horses will need tending?" 6 to 8, depending on the team. Water, feed. Check their hooves for stones. Can you handle that? Clara had groomed her own mount during her years with the Markhams. "Yes." He finished his coffee in silence, then stood. "I'll show you the routine." The next hours passed in a blur of unfamiliar work. Reed demonstrated how he wanted the horses cared for the amount of grain, the way to check for lameness, how to handle the more temperamental animals. His movements were efficient, gentle despite his size. The horses responded to him with obvious trust. Clara tried to memorize everything, aware of him watching her attempts to manage the heavy water buckets, the way she hesitated before entering a stall with a particularly large stallion. "He won't hurt you," Reed said quietly. "None of them will. If you're calm, they sense fear." She forced herself to relax, stroking the stallion's neck as Reed had shown her. The horse whickered softly, accepting her touch. By 8 o'clock, her back ached and her hands were raw despite her gloves, but the morning chores were done. She turned her attention to preparing food for the incoming passengers. The cook stove in the office fought her attempts to regulate its heat. Her first batch of biscuits burned on the bottom while remaining raw in the center. She scraped them into the waste bucket and tried again, acutely aware of Reed working just outside, probably regretting his decision to hire her. The second batch was better edible, if not elegant. She set beans to simmer and sliced the salt pork, the familiar motions of kitchen work gradually returning. By the time she heard the stage horn announcing its approach, she had a passable meal ready. The passengers tumbled out, stiff and dusty from travel: a merchant and his wife, 2 miners heading to the northern camps, a young woman who might have been a school teacher, and an older gentleman with the bearing of a former soldier. They crowded into the small office, grateful for warmth and hot food. Clara served them, keeping her eyes down, aware of their curious glances. A woman serving meals at a stage stop was not unusual. A woman with her bearing and speech doing such work was— "Fine biscuits, miss," the soldier said, though they were nothing of the sort. "Thank you, sir." The merchant's wife was less kind, sniffing at the simple fare and making comments about frontier standards to her husband. Clara bit her tongue and refilled coffee cups. Reed came in as the passengers were finishing, bringing with him the smell of cold air and horses. "Teams are ready," he announced. There was a general bustle as the travelers prepared to leave. The young woman, she was indeed a teacher, heading to a position in Montana, paused beside Clara. "It's honest work," she said quietly, pressing a dime into Clara's hand. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Then they were gone, the stage lurching back onto the road in a cloud of dust and snow. Clara stood in the sudden quiet, looking at the coin in her palm. "You did fine," Reed said, beginning to clear the tables. "Teacher was right," It is honest work. I burned the first biscuits. I burned them half the time myself. He carried the dishes to a basin. Stage comes through again on Thursday. Tomorrow we mend harnesses and repair the roof on the north stalls. We, as if she were a partner in this enterprise rather than a desperate woman he'd taken pity on. Clara pocketed the dime and began washing dishes. The afternoon brought a different sort of challenge. Word had apparently spread that Reed had taken on help specifically, that the stranded governess was now working at the stable. Several townspeople found excuses to stop by. Mrs. Holbrook from the general store appeared first, ostensibly looking for her husband, but clearly eager to satisfy her curiosity. She was a thin woman with sharp eyes that took in every detail of Clara's appearance. "My word," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Henry said you'd asked about work, but I never imagined, well, how the mighty have fallen." Clara continued polishing a harness, keeping her voice level. "I find the work satisfying, Mrs. Holbrook." "Satisfying," the woman sniffed. "I suppose that's one word for it. Living up there in the loft like a common—" She caught herself. "Well, I'm sure it's temporary." After she left, Reed emerged from a stall where he'd been working. "She's a gossip. Half the town will know your business by sundown. They appear to know it already." True enough. He went back to work, but Clara caught him watching her afterward, something thoughtful in his expression. 2 more visitors came that afternoon, the pastor's wife, full of poorly disguised disapproval, and, surprisingly, Dolly from the saloon, who brought Clara a wool shawl. "Thought you might need this," she said, ignoring Reed's presence entirely. "Gets mighty cold up in lofts. I should know slept in my share before the Crown took me on." Clara accepted the gift, touched by the unexpected kindness. "Thank you, truly." Dolly shrugged. "Us working girls got to stick together." She shot a look at Reed. "You treating her decent." "She's an employee," Reed said curtly. "That ain't what I asked." Dolly studied him with eyes older than her years. "I know your reputation. Reed Kerrigan, keep to yourself, don't bother nobody. But a woman alone, dependent on a man's goodwill." "I'm fine," Clara interrupted. "Mr. Kerrigan has been entirely proper." Dolly nodded slowly. "All right then. You need anything, you send word to the Crown. Ask for me." After she left, an uncomfortable silence settled over the stable. Clara went back to her work, aware of the implications in Dolly's warnings. A woman alone, living above a stable, working for a single man. She knew how it looked. "I don't care what they think," she said suddenly. Reed looked up from the ledger he'd been studying. "No. I've spent my life caring what people think, maintaining propriety, being respectable." She set down the harness with more force than necessary. "Where's it gotten me stranded in a mining town, washing dishes for travelers?" "Could be worse," Reed said mildly. "Could be serving drinks at the Crown." Despite everything, Clara found herself almost smiling. "True." He closed the ledger. "Sun's getting low. I'll show you where things are for supper." The evening meal was simple beans, cornbread, dried apple pie that Reed produced from somewhere. They ate in the office, the stove crackling between them. Outside, snow began to fall again. Heavy flakes that would mean difficult travel come morning. "Where did you learn to handle horses?" Clara asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "Grew up on a farm in Ohio. Enlisted in '61. His voice went flat. "Cavalry. Saw too much. Came west after—" She wanted to ask more, but sensed the door closing on that topic. "And the stage line?" "Bought the contract 5 years ago. Previous owner drank himself to death. It's steady work. Quiet, mostly." He glanced at her. "Until today. I apologize for the disruption." "Didn't say it was unwelcome." He stood, gathering the plates. "Just unexpected." Clara helped clean up, then climbed to the loft as Reed did his final check of the horses. She could hear him moving below, the low murmur of his voice as he spoke to each animal. There was something soothing about the sound, a reminder that she wasn't entirely alone. She prepared for bed, wrapping Dolly's shawl around her shoulders for extra warmth. The day had been exhausting in ways her previous life hadn't prepared her for physical labor, yes, but also the weight of curious stares. The knowledge that her fall from respectable employment was now public entertainment. A knock on the barn door below made her freeze. Reed's footsteps, then voices his low rumble and another man's slurred words. "Heard you got yourself a woman up there. Kerrigan." "You're drunk. Hutchins, go home." "Just wanted a look at the fancy governess. Bet she's not so fancy now. Hey, bet she's grateful for any—" There was a thud, then scrambling sounds. Reed's voice, deadly quiet. "Get off my property. Don't come back." Footsteps retreating. The barn door closing. Clara remained frozen, heart pounding. After a long moment, she heard Reed climbing the ladder. He stopped at the top, not entering her space but visible in the lamplight. "You all right?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Hutchins works at the mine. Mean drunk. He won't bother you again." He paused. "I'll put a bolt on the barn door. Should have done it already." "Thank you." He studied her for a moment. "This kind of thing, it's likely to happen again. Towns full of rough men and a woman in your position. They make assumptions." "I understand." "Do you?" His voice was serious. "Because if you stay here, working for me, there'll be talk, more than today. Your reputation is already ruined." Clara finished. "A governess who lives in a stable works as a servant. I've already fallen. Mr. Kerrigan, the only question is whether I survive the landing." Something shifted in his expression. "All right then." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small oil lamp. "Thought you might need this. Better light than what you have." He set it on the loft floor and descended without another word. Clara picked up the lamp, noting how it was already filled, the wick trimmed, a small kindness, quietly given. She lit it and placed it on the trunk, its warm glow pushing back the shadows. Through the gaps in the floor, she could see Reed's light moving as he made a final check of the doors, securing the new bolt he must have had ready. Looking after her, in his way, not from pity or improper interest, but because it was right, because she was under his roof, such as it was, and that made her his responsibility. Clara pulled the blankets up to her chin and watched the lamp's flame dance. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more work, more whispers, more reminders of how far she'd fallen from her previous life. But tonight, she was warm and safe, with honest work ahead and a quiet man's protection below. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but as she drifted towards sleep, listening to the horses and the wind and Reed's footsteps making their rounds, she thought it might be a life she could build something from. If she was strong enough, if they'd let her. The lamp flickered, casting shadows on the rough walls. Clara closed her eyes and let exhaustion take her, one hand resting on Dolly's shawl, the other near the lamp Reed had brought, small anchors in an uncertain world, but anchors nonetheless. Tomorrow, she would face whatever came. Tonight, for the first time in months, she slept without dreams of falling. The wind howled through the gaps in the loft walls, a mournful sound that had kept Clara awake for hours. She lay still beneath the rough blankets, staring at the shadows cast by Reed's lamp. Below, she could hear him moving about the creak of his chair, the scratch of a pen on paper. He was still awake too. It had been 3 days since Hutchins had come to the barn drunk. 3 days of careful distance between them, of Reed arriving earlier to complete chores before she came down, of meals eaten in near silence. The easy companionship of that first day had vanished, replaced by something tense and unspoken. Clara pulled the blanket higher, her breath visible in the cold air. She thought of her old room at the Markham, small but warm, with rose-patterned wallpaper and a proper bed. She'd given it up for this, for the promise of independence and better wages. Now she had neither. A sound made her freeze footsteps on the ladder. Slow, deliberate. "Miss Malone," Reed's voice, quiet. "You awake?" Yes. His head appeared at the loft entrance. He held a steaming cup in one hand. "Thought you might want something warm. Coffee's fresh." She sat up, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. "Thank you." He climbed the rest of the way up, but stayed near the ladder, setting the cup on the floor within her reach. In the lamplight, she could see the weariness etched on his face, the way he held himself carefully distant. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Storm's getting worse. Worried about the roof on the north stalls." He glanced around the loft, seeming to see it clearly for the first time. "This isn't right. You shouldn't be up here." "We've discussed this. I have nowhere else." "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as frustration. "That's the problem. You're stuck here because of circumstances, and He stopped. "You're what?" "Making it worse, the talk in town, your reputation." Clara picked up the coffee, wrapping her cold fingers around the warm tin. "My reputation was forfeit the moment I took work at a stable. Whether I sleep here or somewhere else makes little difference." "It makes a difference to me." The words hung between them. Reed shifted uncomfortably, looking anywhere but at her. "I grew up understanding my place," Clara said quietly. "Good family, good education, groomed to marry well. When that didn't happen, when I proved too outspoken, too independent, I became a governess. Still respectable, still within bounds. But this," she gestured at the loft, "this is outside everything I was taught to be, and you know what I've discovered." He looked at her then, waiting. "I don't miss it. The constant watching, measuring every word, every action, sitting properly, speaking softly, always deferring." She took a sip of coffee, bitter and strong. "Here, I work hard and sleep tired. It's honest, simple." "Lonely," Reed added. "Yes." She met his eyes. "But I was lonely before, too. At least now I'm not pretending otherwise." He was quiet for a long moment. "Then, my sister wrote stories. Before the war. She'd have liked you said the same things about women having to pretend." "What happened to her?" "Typhoid. While I was gone." His voice went flat. "Came back to empty houses and dead fields. Nothing left but ghosts." Clara wanted to reach out but didn't. The space between them felt fragile. Important. "Is that why you came west?" "Partly, mostly because I couldn't stand the pity. Poor Reed Kerrigan, lost his family, lost his mind in the war. They looked at me like I was broken." He laughed, harsh. "Maybe they were right." "You don't seem broken to me." "No," he studied her. "What do I seem like?" "Careful, kind, beneath the distance, lonely." She echoed his word back. "But not broken." The wind gusted, shaking the walls. Reed stood abruptly. "Storm's getting bad. I should check the horses." Reed. She rarely used his given name. It stopped him at the ladder. "Thank you. For the coffee. For not pretending I'm not here." He nodded once and disappeared below. Clara finished the coffee slowly, listening to him moving among the horses, his low voice soothing nervous animals. When she finally slept, she dreamed of empty fields and rose-patterned walls, of sisters who wrote stories and never got to finish them. Morning brought snow piled against the barn doors and a white world outside. Reed was already working when Clara climbed down, breaking ice from water troughs. They worked in companionable silence, the storm having washed away some of the tension between them. "Stage won't run in this," Reed said as they finished feeding the horses. "Roads will be blocked for days." "What about supplies?" "Got enough. Beans and cornmeal aren't fancy, but they'll keep us fed." He glanced at her. "You all right with being snowed in town? Gossips will have a field day." "Let them talk." Clara flexed her fingers, stiff despite her gloves. though I wouldn't mind a proper bath. There's a tub in the storage room. I can heat water if you—" He stopped, color rising in his cheeks. "That is, you're welcome to use it." The thought of hot water, of washing away days of stable work, was almost overwhelming. I'd be grateful. It took an hour to heat enough water, hauling it bucket by bucket from the pump. Reed cleared out the storage room, dragging the metal tub to where she'd have privacy. He left soap and clean towels without being asked. Clara sank into the water with a sigh of pure relief. Her hands were rougher now, calluses forming where none had been before. Her hair, once carefully arranged each morning, hung limp and shapeless. She was changing, adapting to this new life in ways that went beyond the physical. When she emerged, dressed in her cleaner dress, Reed had soup warming on the stove and fresh coffee ready. They ate together in the office, watching snow fall past the windows. "Tell me about Ohio," Clara said, "before the war." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, green. So green it hurt to look at sometimes. We had 40 acres, mostly corn, 2 horses, dozen chickens, couple of milk cows. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Your sister, Mary, 2 years younger, smart as anything, always reading when she should have been churning butter. Ma despaired of making her domestic. A ghost of a smile. She'd have gone to college if things had been different. My parents despaired of me, too. Clara offered. Too many opinions, too little interest in watercolors and piano, though I learned both, of course. Of course. The smile became real. Proper young lady. Hardly. I once told Reverend Whitman his sermon on women's duties was antiquated nonsense. During Sunday dinner, with guests present. Reed's laugh surprised them both, rich and genuine. What did your parents do? Sent me to my room, then to finishing school. Then, when that didn't take, they started accepting suitors on my behalf. Her own smile faded. I refused them all. Too proud, too particular. By the time I realized I'd priced myself out of the marriage market, it was too late. Their loss. The simple statement warmed her more than the soup. They finished eating in comfortable silence. Then Reed stood to check the horses again. At the door, he paused. That first night, when you came here, I almost sent you away. Clara looked up, startled. Why didn't you? You reminded me of Mary. That way of holding your head high even when the world's trying to push you down. Figured anyone with that much steel in their spine deserved a chance. He left before she could respond. Clara sat alone in the warm office, surrounded by ledgers and harnesses and the smell of coffee, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not love, she was too old, too practical for such fancies, but recognition, perhaps, of one survivor seeing another across the wasteland of their separate griefs. The storm lasted 2 more days. They developed a rhythm morning chores, meals, Reed teaching her to mend harnesses while she helped him with the ledgers. Her educated hand made quick work of his haphazard bookkeeping. You're losing money on the grain, she said, showing him the figures. Thompson's charging you 20% more than market rate. Only supplier who'll deliver out here. What about buying direct from farmers? Cut out the middleman. He studied the numbers. Never thought of it. Always just paid what was asked. Men often do. She softened the words with a smile. Let me write some letters. I'll find you better prices. On the 3rd night, the wind finally died. They stood outside the barn, looking at a world transformed by snow. Stars appeared between racing clouds, brilliant in the clear air. It's beautiful, Clara breathed. Cold beauty kills as easy as it charms. Reed pulled his coat closer. Like a lot of things out here. Speaking from experience. He glanced at her. Maybe. They stood quietly, their breath misting in the frigid air. Inside the barn, horses shifted inside. The moment stretched, peaceful and complete. Clara, her name on his lips, deliberate. What happens when spring comes, when the road's clear and you can leave? She'd been trying not to think about it. I don't know. Find another position, I suppose. Try again. You could stay. The words dropped between them like stones in still water. Clara turned to look at him, but his face was shadowed. As your stable hand living in the loft while the town whispers? No. He met her eyes then. As something else. I don't know what yet, but not that. She couldn't speak. The offer, vague as it was, hung between them. Not a declaration, not a proposal, just possibility. Think about it, Reed said when she remained silent. No rush. Spring's a long way off. He went inside, leaving her alone with the stars and the snow and the weight of unspoken futures. Clara stood until the cold drove her in, then climbed to her loft and lit the lamp he'd given her. One blanket, spread on a narrow cot, a trunk holding her few possessions, gaps in the walls where winter crept in. It wasn't much, but as she prepared for bed, she found herself thinking not of what she lacked, but of what waited below a quiet man who saw her clearly, who offered possibilities without demands. She blew out the lamp and settled into bed. Tomorrow would bring the resumption of routine. The stage would run again. Passengers would need feeding. The town would remember to disapprove of her choices. But tonight, suspended between storm and thaw, she allowed herself to imagine staying, not as a governess or a stable hand, but as herself, Clara, just Clara. The thought followed her into sleep, warming her more than any blanket could. In the stable below, Reed made his rounds, checking locks and lanterns. If he paused beneath the loft, if he looked up at the dark space where she lay dreaming well, only the horses were there to see. The market occupied a narrow building on Main Street, its shelves stocked with goods hauled in by freight wagon before the snow. Clara moved among the aisles, her basket slowly filling with the week's necessities: flour, salt, a precious tin of baking powder. She'd convinced Reed to let her handle the shopping, arguing that her presence in town might stifle some of the gossip, face it directly rather than hide from it. She was examining dried beans when she heard them women's voices, pitched to Carrie. There she is, the governess. Former governess. Did you see her hands red as a washerwoman's? Clara kept her eyes on the beans, counting out pounds with steady hands. Mrs. Holbrook and her circle, clucking like hens with fresh scratch. Living above a stable, can you imagine, and with him there every night. My husband says Carrigan's always been odd, keeping to himself, never taking a wife. Now we know why. Heat crept up Clara's neck, but she forced herself to continue shopping. Let them talk. Their words couldn't change her circumstances. Bold as brass, shopping like a decent woman. If I were her, I'd die of shame. That voice belonged to Mrs. Pruitt, the banker's wife. Clara had inquired about a position in their household her second day in town, only to be turned away without explanation. She turned then, fixing Mrs. Pruitt with a steady gaze. Fortunately, madam, you are not me, and I find I'm rather difficult to kill, even with shame. Mrs. Pruitt's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Her companions tittered nervously, unsure whether to be scandalized or amused. Well, I never... No, Clara agreed pleasantly. I don't suppose you have... Never been hungry, never been cold, never had to choose between pride and survival. How fortunate for you. She took her basket to the counter, where Mr. Holbrook waited with obvious discomfort. The shop had gone quiet. Everyone listening. On Mr. Carrigan's account, please, Clara said, as if the entire store weren't holding its breath. He tallied her purchases slowly, glancing at his wife. Miss Malone, perhaps it would be better if you sent word what you need. I could have it delivered. To spare your customers the sight of me, Clara kept her voice level. I think not. Mr. Holbrook, I'll continue to shop like any other citizen of Ash Bluff." "You're hardly like any other citizen," Mrs. Pruitt muttered. Clara turned back to her. "You're absolutely right. I'm educated. I speak 3 languages. I've dined with senators and taught the daughters of judges. And now I muck out stalls and serve beans to stagecoach passengers. Which experience, do you think, has taught me more about the true nature of people?" She collected her purchases and walked out, head high, leaving silence in her wake. Only when she was halfway back to the stable did she allow her hands to tremble. Reed was repairing a wagon wheel when she returned. He looked up at her approach, taking in her flushed cheeks and the rigid set of her shoulders. "Rough morning." "Educational." She set the basket down harder than necessary. "Apparently, my presence offends the delicate sensibilities of Ash Bluff's finest citizens." He straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. "What happened?" "Nothing that hasn't happened before. Just louder, more public." She began unpacking supplies, movements sharp. They assume we... I know what they think." "Doesn't it bother you?" Reed shrugged. "People have been talking about me since I arrived. The strange veteran who keeps to himself. Let them talk. It's different for you. You're a man. Your reputation. Is that you're working for a fair wage and sleeping with a roof over your head? Nothing more." He paused. "Unless you want there to be..." The words hung between them. "Unexpected." Clara's hand stilled on a bag of flour. "I don't know what I want," she admitted. "I used to. Marriage, children, a household to run. When that became impossible, I wanted independence, security, now." She gestured helplessly. "Now I'm washing dishes in a stable and arguing with bankers' wives in the general store." "Is that so bad?" She looked at him, really looked. His clothes were worn but clean, his hands scarred from work and war. Not handsome in the conventional sense, but solid, real, kind in ways that mattered. "No," she said quietly. "It's not bad. It's just not what I expected." Life rarely is. He went back to the wheel. "I need to check the north property tomorrow. Storm might have damaged the fence line. Want to come?" The invitation surprised her. Since their conversation during the storm, they'd maintained a careful balance, friendly but professional, warm but bounded. This felt like something shifting. "I should prepare for Thursday's stage. We'll be back by evening. Might do you good to get away from town for a bit." Away from whispers and stares and women who'd never missed a meal judging her choices. "All right." They left at dawn, Reed driving the wagon while Clara sat beside him, wrapped in Dolly's shawl and an old coat he'd found for her. The snow-covered landscape stretched endlessly, broken only by bare trees and distant mountains. Their breath puffed white in the cold air. "Beautiful country," Clara observed. "Harsh country. Beautiful and harsh aren't opposites out here." Reed handled the horses with easy competence. That's what people from back east don't understand. They come expecting one or the other. The land gives them both and breaks the ones who can't adapt. "Is that what happened to you? You adapted? Or it broke me and I didn't notice?" His smile was wry. "Some days I can't tell the difference." They rode in comfortable silence. The only sounds the creak of wheels and harness. Clara found herself studying his profile, the lines carved by sun and sorrow. The way he held himself even on a rough wagon seat, alert to danger that might never come. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "About the war." His hands tightened on the reins almost imperceptibly. "You can ask. You don't have to answer." "I know." He was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want to know?" "Did you ever regret going every day?" No hesitation. "And I'd go again. That's the hell of it. Knowing it was necessary and knowing what it cost aren't mutually exclusive. My brother went..." The words surprised her. She rarely spoke of James. "Came back different. Drank himself to death within 2 years." "I'm sorry." He was the heir, the hope. When he died, my parents just stopped, like he was the only child who mattered. Old bitterness, carefully controlled. I suppose that's when I learned to stop expecting things to go according to plan. Reed glanced at her. Maybe that's why you're surviving this better than most would. You've had practice. They reached the property line by mid-morning. The fence had indeed suffered damage, posts down, wire tangled. Reed set to work with practiced efficiency while Clara held supplies and tried to be useful. See that valley? He pointed east. Come spring, it'll be green as anything. Wildflowers by the thousands. Hard to believe now, but I've seen it. You love this land. It leaves me alone. That's worth something. He hammered a post back into position. People in town think I'm planning something. Why else would a man claim land this far out? Must be gold or silver or some scheme. Can't just be a man wanting quiet. Is that all you want, quiet? He paused in his work. Used to be, lately, he shrugged. Man can change his mind. They worked until noon, when Reed built a small fire and made coffee. They sat on a fallen log, sharing bread and dried beef, watching smoke rise into the crystal air. I've been thinking, Clara said, about your supply problem. What if we approach the stage line about carrying freight small goods, mail order items? You already have the storage space and the connections. Reed considered. Would mean more work, more bookkeeping. I'm good at bookkeeping. You are. He studied her, already thinking like a partner. Is that what I am, a partner? Could be, if you stayed. He stood, kicking snow over the fire. We should head back. The return journey felt different. Something had shifted between them on that snowy hillside, not dramatic, not passionate, just two people recognizing possibility in each other. As they neared town, Clara could see smoke rising from chimneys, the ordinary life of Ash Bluff continuing despite her small rebellions. The stable came into view, solid and welcoming in its way. Thank you, she said, for today, for seeing past what everyone assumes. Nothing to see past. You are who you are. Clara, that's enough. It was the first time he'd said her name without prompting. The sound of it in his quiet voice did something to her chest, a loosening, a warmth. They pulled into the stable yard to find a visitor waiting. Dolly stood by the office door, shivering in her thin dress. About time, she called. I'm half frozen. Reed helped Clara down from the wagon, his hands lingering a moment on her waist. Dolly noticed, her painted lips curving in a knowing smile. What brings you out here? Clara asked, leading the way inside. News. Thought you should hear it from a friend first. Dolly accepted the coffee Clara poured gratefully. There's talk in town. Mrs. Pruitt stirring up the church ladies, saying something needs to be done about the moral situation at the stable. Done. Reed's voice was dangerously quiet. She's pushing for the town council to revoke your business license. Says it's unseemly. A single woman living here. Bad for the town's reputation. Clara sank into a chair. Of course, she'd challenged Mrs. Pruitt publicly, and this was the response. Can they do that? Mayor owes the bank money, Dolly said. So yes, probably. Reed set his cup down carefully, too carefully. When? Council meets Monday, 3 days. Dolly looked between them. I'm sorry. I know it ain't fair. But fair doesn't matter much in this town. After Dolly left, Clara and Reed sat in heavy silence. The afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across the floor. I'll leave, Clara said finally. Tomorrow. I have enough saved for stage fare to Denver. You'll keep your license and... No. Reed, be practical. This is your livelihood. And what about yours? He stood abruptly, pacing. You leave now. Where do you go? What do you do? Start over again in another town. Hope the next position works out better. What choice do I have? He stopped pacing, looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. "I might have an idea, but you probably won't like it." "Tell me." "We could—" He ran a hand through his hair. "We could make it respectable. What they think is happening here. Make it real." Clara's breath caught. "Are you proposing—" "I'm suggesting a business arrangement. Marriage would protect your reputation, secure your position. I'd gain a partner who's already proved her worth. Practical solution to a practical problem." "How romantic." The words came out sharper than intended. "You want romance, pretty words, and promises, because I don't have those. What I have is respect for you. A place that could be yours as much as mine, a future that we'd build together." He met her eyes. "That's all I'm offering. Question is whether it's enough." Clara stood slowly, crossing to the window. Outside, snow was beginning to fall again. Soft flakes drifting past the glass. A practical proposal from a practical man. No declarations of love, no passion. Just survival and respect and the possibility of building something together. Was it enough? She thought of Mrs. Pruitt's sneer, of all the positions lost to being too much or not enough, of cold rooms and uncertain futures and the constant need to prove herself worthy of basic kindness. Then she thought of Reed's quiet presence, his steady hands, the way he'd said her name like it meant something. "I need to think," she said. "Fair enough. You've got 3 days." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Clara, whatever you decide, this week working with you, talking with you, it hasn't been a hardship." Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the falling snow and a choice that would change everything. Marriage without love, or freedom without security. Neither option was what she'd dreamed of as a girl. But then, she wasn't that girl anymore. She climbed to the loft as darkness fell, lit the lamp Reed had given her that first night, and sat on her narrow bed. Through the gaps in the floor, she could hear him moving below, the ordinary sounds of evening chores. Such a strange foundation for a life together. Yet perhaps no stranger than the marriages built on proper introductions and suitable connections that had eluded her for so long. 3 days to decide. 3 days to choose between the uncertain road and the unexpected shelter. Clara pulled out paper and pen, thinking to make a list of reasons for and against. But the blank page stared back at her, refusing to reduce the complexity of two damaged people finding each other in an unforgiving place to simple columns of pros and cons. Instead, she wrote a single word, asterisk, maybe, asterisk. It wasn't yes, it wasn't no. But for tonight, with snow falling and Reed keeping watch below, it was enough. The abandoned cabin sat in a grove of cottonwoods, its roof partially caved in from snow weight. Clara pulled her horse alongside Reed's, studying their unexpected shelter. They'd been checking the eastern boundary when the storm hit sudden and fierce, turning the world white within minutes. "It'll do," Reed said, already dismounting. "Better than trying to ride back in this." Clara slid from her saddle, muscles stiff from the morning's ride. 2 days had passed since his proposal. 2 days of careful distance, of business as usual while the question hung between them unanswered. Tomorrow the town council would meet. Tonight, it seemed. The weather had other plans. Inside, the cabin was marginally warmer than outside. Reed immediately set about checking the chimney while Clara surveyed their surroundings. 1 room, a broken table, a bench that might hold weight. Gaps in the walls let in wind and snow, but the corner near the fireplace seemed solid enough. "Someone's been here recent," Reed observed, pointing to ashes in the fireplace. "Drifters, probably, or hunters." He gathered what dry wood he could find, coaxing a small fire to life. Clara unpacked their saddlebags' coffee, hardtack, dried beef. They'd planned to be back by noon, now, with the storm howling outside. Return seemed impossible before morning. "We'll have to share the blanket," Reed said matter-of-factly, pulling their single saddle blanket from his pack. "And stay close to the fire. Temperature's dropping fast." Clara nodded, trying to match his practical tone. They were adults. They could share warmth without it meaning anything beyond survival. Yet, as darkness fell and the storm intensified, the small space seemed to shrink around them. They sat on the bench, shoulders touching, sharing the blanket. The fire cast dancing shadows on rough walls. Outside, wind screamed through the trees, but inside their small circle of warmth, there was quiet. "My answer is yes," Clara said suddenly. Reed went still beside her. "You sure?" "No," she laughed, short and uncertain. "I'm not sure of anything anymore, but I know I don't want to leave. I know we work well together. I know you're a good man who deserves better than gossip and loneliness." "What about you? What do you deserve?" "Safety, purpose, respect." She turned to look at him. "You've already given me those. That all you want safety and purpose?" The question hung between them. Clara could feel his warmth through the shared blanket, see the firelight catching in his eyes. "I stopped wanting things I couldn't have a long time ago," she said quietly. "Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you should want more." His hand found hers under the blanket. Just that fingers intertwining, palm against palm. Clara felt her breath catch at the simple contact. "Reed, I'm not good with words," he said. "Never have been. But this week, watching you stand up to those women, seeing you work without complaint, the way you laugh when you think no one's listening," he squeezed her hand gently, "made me remember what wanting feels like." Clara felt tears threaten. Don't say things you don't mean just because—" "I don't say things I don't mean, ever." He turned more fully toward her. "I'm not offering love at first sight or poetry or whatever men are supposed to offer. But I'm offering what I have. All of it." She studied his face in the firelight, weathered, honest, carefully hopeful. This wasn't how proposals happened in the novels she'd read. No declarations, no dramatics. Just two people who'd been broken by life finding something whole in each other. "All right," she whispered. "All right." "Yes, to your proposal, to staying, to—" She gestured helplessly. "Whatever this is." Reed's smile transformed his face, years falling away. "We'll figure it out as we go." They sat quietly after that, hands still linked, watching the fire. The storm raged outside, but inside their small shelter, peace settled over them like a second blanket. "Tell me about your sister," Clara said eventually. "What stories did she write?" Reed's thumb traced circles on her palm as he spoke. "Adventures, mostly. Heroes and villains and ladies who saved themselves instead of waiting for rescue. Ma said it was unwomanly, but Pa would sneak her paper when Ma wasn't looking." "She sounds wonderful." "She was stubborn as anything, like someone else I know." He glanced at her. "She'd have liked that you stood up to Mrs. Pruitt. Mary never could abide bullies." "What happened to her stories?" "Burned with the house. Union soldiers came through while I was fighting for them 3 states away." His voice held old pain, carefully managed. "Irony of war. You destroy your own as often as the enemy." Clara squeezed his hand. "I'm sorry." "Long time ago. But sometimes, when you're working on the ledgers, tongue poking out when you concentrate, you remind me of her. How focused she'd get." "My tongue doesn't poke out." "Does too." His smile was gentle. "It's endearing." Endearing. When was the last time anyone had found her endearing rather than difficult? The fire was dying down. Reed reluctantly let go of her hand to add more wood. When he sat back down, Clara made a decision. She leaned into him, head on his shoulder. He stiffened for a moment, then relaxed, arm coming around her. "This all right?" he asked. "More than all right." They dozed fitfully, waking to add wood to the fire. Sometime near dawn, Clara woke to find herself curled against Reed's chest, his arms secure around her. She should have been embarrassed, should have pulled away. Instead, She listened to his heartbeat and felt safer than she had in years. The storm broke with a sunrise. They emerged from the cabin to a world-transformed snow thick on every surface, sky brilliant blue above. Their horses stood patient where they'd sheltered them, frost on their manes. "We should get back," Reed said, but he didn't move to saddle the horses. Instead, he turned to Clara. "Before we do, I want to be clear about something. This marriage, it doesn't have to be. That is, I won't expect." Clara placed a hand on his arm, stopping his fumbling words. "We'll figure it out as we go. Remember?" Relief crossed his face. "Right, yes." They rode back slowly, picking their way through drifts. As they neared town, Clara could see smoke rising from chimneys. Ordinary life resuming after the storm, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. Everything had shifted in that small cabin futures, rewritten by firelight and honest words. At the stable, they found Reverend Mills waiting. The elderly minister stood up as they approached, brushing snow from his coat. "Reverend," Reed said carefully, "early for a social call." "Not a social call, I'm afraid." Mills looked between them, his expression troubled. "I've come from an emergency meeting of the church board. Mrs. Pruitt has been quite vocal about the situation here." Clara's heart sank. They'd run out of time. "However," Mills continued, "I've also had a visit from Miss Dolly at the Copper Crown. She made quite an impassioned defense of Miss Malone's character. Said I was a hypocrite if I listened to gossip over truth." "Dolly did that?" Clara couldn't hide her surprise. "She did. Made me think." Mills pulled at his beard. "I've been ministering in frontier towns for 20 years, seen all manner of arrangements born of necessity. Not all of them fit proper society's expectations, but many of them were built on stronger foundations than marriages I've blessed in fine churches." "What are you saying?" Reed asked. "I'm saying that if you were to present yourselves for marriage today, now I'd perform the ceremony. Would solve everyone's problems. Seems to me." Clara and Reed exchanged glances. They'd thought they'd have more time, a proper courtship of sorts, but life on the frontier rarely accommodated such niceties. "Give us an hour," Reed said finally. Mills nodded. "I'll wait at the church. Bring witnesses." After he left, Clara stood frozen in the stable yard. "This is happening very fast." "Too fast." Reed studied her face. "We can refuse, face the council, fight the charges." "And probably lose." Clara took a breath. "No. We decided, let's do it before I lose my nerve." An hour later, they stood in the small church. Clara wore her best dress, the green wool she'd saved for interviews. Reed had shaved and put on a clean shirt. Their witnesses were unexpected Dolly, defiant in her bright dress among the simple pews, and, surprisingly, the schoolteacher from the stage, who'd returned to town that morning. "Figured you needed respectable folk," the teacher, Miss Barrett, said quietly. "What they're doing to you isn't right." Mills performed the ceremony simply, without flourish. Clara heard the words as if from a distance: honor, cherish, protect. Reed's responses were steady, certain. Hers came out whispered but clear. "The ring?" Mills asked. Reed produced a simple band, his mother's. He'd told Clara quickly while they dressed. It fit perfectly, as if meant to be. "You may kiss your bride." They both froze. In all their planning, they hadn't discussed this. Reed looked at her, question in his eyes. Clara nodded slightly. The kiss was brief, gentle, a promise more than passion. But his hand cupped her cheek, and she leaned into the touch, and for a moment the world narrowed to just them. "I now pronounce you man and wife." Wife. The word echoed in Clara's mind as they signed the register. Clara Kerrigan. She'd given up her father's name for a new identity, a new life built on necessity and unexpected tenderness. Outside the church, Dolly hugged Clara fiercely. "You did good, honey. Don't let anyone tell you different. Thank you for speaking to the Reverend, for everything. Us working girls got to stick together, remember? Dolly winked. Besides, I know a good man when I see one, and he's been looking at you like you hung the moon since you arrived. Clara glanced at Reed, deep in conversation with Mills. He has... Lord, yes, man's been alone so long he forgot how to show it, but it's there. Dolly adjusted her shawl. You'll be good for each other. Just give it time. As they walked back to the stable home now, Clara realized Reed took her hand. Such a simple gesture, but it felt monumental in the middle of Main Street, in full view of anyone watching. Regrets? He asked quietly. No. She was surprised to find she meant it. You? None. He squeezed her hand. We'll move your things down from the loft today. There's a room off the office. I've been using it for storage, but it'll do for now. For now, because they were married but not truly wed, partners but not yet lovers. It should have been awkward, but somehow it felt right, this careful navigation of new territory. That evening, Clara cooked their first meal as husband and wife. Nothing fancy, beans and cornbread, dried apple pie, but Reed's eyes were warm as he thanked her, and when their fingers brushed passing dishes, neither pulled away. Tomorrow will be interesting, Clara observed, when word spreads. Let them talk. They'll find something else soon enough. Reed poured coffee, his movements easy. Besides, now you're a respectable married woman, immune to gossip. Is that why you married me, to save my reputation? No. He met her eyes across the table. I married you because when I think about tomorrow, and next week, and next year you're there. Been a long time since I could see any future at all. Clara felt her throat tighten. Reed. I know. Too much too soon. He smiled slightly. But you asked, and I don't say things I don't mean. Remember? She did remember. It was one of the things she was learning to count on: his honesty, his steadiness, the way he said her name like a prayer. Later, they sat by the stove in comfortable silence. Reed worked on a harness while Clara updated the ledgers. Ordinary evening tasks, but weighted with new meaning. This was their life now, built from necessity but growing into something neither had expected. When it grew late, Reed stood, suddenly awkward. The room's ready. I put fresh linens on the bed. Clara rose too, equally uncertain. Thank you. They stood facing each other. The day's momentum finally stilled. Husband and wife, bound by law and witness, but still essentially strangers. Good night, Clara, Reed said softly. Good night. She moved toward her new room, then paused. Reed, today, when you kissed me, too much. No. She turned back to him. Not enough. Something flared in his eyes: surprise, hope, carefully banked desire. We have time. Yes, she smiled. We do. In her new room, their room, eventually. Perhaps Clara unpacked her few belongings. The bed was larger than her cot, the space warmer than the loft. Through the wall, she could hear Reed moving about, the ordinary sounds of a man preparing for sleep. Her husband. The word still felt foreign, but not unwelcome, like a coat that needed wearing to fit properly. She'd married for protection, for security, for the simple right to stay. But sitting in that cabin, sharing warmth while the storm raged, she'd felt something else. Possibility. Hope. The first stirrings of what might, given time and trust, become love. Clara changed into her nightgown and slipped into bed. The sheets smelled of soap and cedar. Clean, honest smells, like the man who'd placed them there. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Mrs. Pruitt wouldn't give up easily. The town would have opinions about their sudden marriage. There would be awkward moments as they learned to be married in truth as well as law. But tonight, Clara Kerrigan lay in her marriage bed and felt, for the first time in years, that she was exactly where she belonged, not because it was proper or expected, but because a quiet man had offered her half his blanket and all of his tomorrows. It was enough, more than enough. It was a beginning. The woman stepped down from the Denver stage with practiced grace, her traveling dress immaculate despite the dusty journey. Everything about her spoke of money, from the fox fur collar to the delicate kid gloves that had never known work. Clara, carrying water buckets from the pump, froze at the sight of her. "Reed," the woman's voice carried across the yard like a bell. "Reed Kerrigan." Reed emerged from the stable, a bridle in his hands. His expression went carefully blank. A look Clara had learned meant he was controlling strong emotion. "Josephine." So formal. The woman laughed, a silvery sound that seemed out of place in the working stable yard. "After everything we were to each other." Clara set down the buckets, her hands suddenly unsteady. This was her, the woman from Reed's past. Even without the confirmation, she would have known. Everything about Josephine Aldridge spoke of the life Reed had left behind. "What are you doing here?" Reed's voice was level, but Clara caught the tension in his shoulders. "Is that any way to greet your former fiancé?" Josephine moved closer, her skirts sweeping the dirty ground. "I've come on business. Father left me some property in his will land adjacent to yours. As it happens, the surveyor says there are disputes about the boundaries." Former fiancé. Clara felt the words like a physical blow. Reed had mentioned losing everything in the war, but he'd never said... "Mrs. Kerrigan," Reed said deliberately. "I'd like you to meet Miss Aldridge. Josephine, my wife, Clara." Josephine's perfect composure cracked for just a moment. Her gaze swept over Clara, the work dress, the reddened hands, the simple braid. "Your wife. 3 weeks now." Clara stepped forward, summoning all her governess training. "How do you do? Miss Aldridge." "Mrs. Aldridge," Josephine corrected coolly. "I'm recently widowed. My late husband left me quite comfortable, though I do miss Chicago society." She turned back to Reed. "I had no idea you'd married. The Reed I knew swore he'd never..." "People change." Reed moved to stand beside Clara, not touching but close enough that she felt his warmth. "What's this about boundaries?" "Oh, that can wait. I'm far more interested in catching up. It's been, 8 years you left so suddenly after..." She trailed off delicately. "Well, after everything fell apart." Clara watched Reed's jaw tighten. "The war ended a lot of things." "Yes, I suppose it did." Josephine's smile was sad and somehow calculating at once. "Where are you staying?" Reed asked, clearly wanting to change the subject. "The hotel, though it's rather rustic. I'd forgotten how primitive these frontier towns can be." She glanced around the stable with barely concealed disdain. "How do you stand it?" "We like it," Clara said firmly. "There's honest work here, good people." Josephine's laugh tinkled again. "Good people in a mining town, how optimistic." She focused on Clara with sharp interest. "And what did you do before becoming a stable hand's wife? No. Let me guess, governess. You have that look about you, proper but poor." Heat flooded Clara's cheeks. "I was indeed a governess. Now I'm Reed's partner in this business." A partner." Josephine tested the word. "How modern. Reed, do you remember when we used to talk about partnership, of course? I meant something rather different. The horses you were going to breed, the estate we'd build." "That was a different life," Reed said flatly. "If you have business, state it. Otherwise..." "So cold now." Josephine touched his arm, a casual gesture that spoke of old familiarity. "Very well. I need to hire a surveyor. Someone who knows the land. I'm told you're the only reliable man in town for such things." "Will you do it?" Reed pulled away from her touch. "I'm busy." "I'll pay well, triple your usual rate." She smiled at Clara. "I'm sure your wife Wouldn't object to the extra income. These stables must be expensive to maintain. Clara felt the trap closing. To refuse would look petty. To accept would mean Reed spending time with this polished reminder of his past. "My husband makes his own decisions," Clara said carefully. Josephine's smile widened. "How refreshing. Most wives I know would jump at the money." She adjusted her gloves. "Think about it. Reed, I'll be in town for at least a month settling Father's affairs. We'll have plenty of time to reconnect." She swept away, leaving perfume and disruption in her wake. Clara and Reed stood in silence, the yard suddenly feeling colder. "You were engaged," Clara said finally. "Yes. You might have mentioned that." Reed set down the bridle he'd been holding throughout the encounter. "It ended 8 years ago. Didn't seem relevant. Your former fiancé arrives looking like a fashion plate, while I'm hauling water like a—" Clara stopped herself. "It seems fairly relevant. You're my wife. She's the past. A past that looks very much like it wants to be the present." Reed turned to face her fully. "Clara, I need to start dinner." She picked up the water buckets, needing distance. "The evening stage will be here soon." She felt his eyes on her as she walked to the office, but he didn't follow. Good. She needed time to think, to process the elegant woman who'd touched Reed's arm like she owned it. The evening stage passengers were more demanding than usual, or perhaps Clara's mood made them seem so. She served the meal mechanically, mind elsewhere. Through the window, she could see Reed working, his movements sharp with his own agitation. After the passengers left, Clara cleaned up in silence. Reed came in as she was finishing, bringing the ledgers for the evening's accounting. "We need to talk," he said, "about what your convenient amnesia regarding former engagements. About Josephine being here at all." He sat heavily. "Her father owned land all over Colorado. There's no reason for her to personally handle property near Ash Bluff unless she came looking for you." "Yes." Clara dried her hands slowly. "Were you very much in love?" The question hung between them. Reed was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "I thought so. I was 22, home from war, and she was everything bright in a dark time, beautiful, accomplished, full of dreams about the future." He met Clara's eyes. "Then I lost everything. The farm, my family, the money her father expected me to have. She married Aldridge 3 months after I left." "But she's here now, widowed, free." "I'm not." The simple statement should have reassured her. Instead, Clara felt the vast difference between herself and Josephine Aldridge more keenly than ever. "She's everything I'm not," Clara said quietly. "Elegant, refined—" "Shallow," Reed interrupted. "Calculating, incapable of hauling her own water or cooking her own meals or standing up to gossips in the general store." He stood, moving closer. "You're worth 10 of her." Pretty words. Truth. He caught her hand. "Clara, I married you. Not for convenience or protection or any of the reasons we told ourselves. I married you because you make me want to be better than I am. Because you see work that needs doing and do it without complaint. Because you're real in a way she never was." Clara wanted to believe him, but the memory of Josephine's casual elegance, her easy familiarity with Reed, made doubt creep in. "She'll be here for a month," Clara said, "wanting your attention, reminding you of what you had together. What we had was built on who I was supposed to be. This," he gestured between them, "is built on who we are. That's stronger." Before the Clara could respond, someone pounded on the door. Reed opened it to find young Tommy from the hotel, breathless from running. "Mr. Kerrigan, come quick. There's trouble at the Copper Crown. That fancy lady from Denver, she went in asking questions about you and your missus. Dolly told her to mind her own business. And now the lady's saying Dolly insulted her. She wants the sheriff to arrest her. Reed grabbed his coat. Clara reached for hers, but he stopped her. "Stay here. Dolly's my friend. And Josephine's looking to cause trouble. Don't give her more ammunition." He was gone before Clara could argue. She paced the small office, imagination conjuring scenes of Josephine creating drama. Reed forced to intervene. Old feelings rekindled in the midst of crisis. An hour passed before Reed returned, bringing Dolly with him. The saloon girl looked defiant but shaken. "That witch tried to have me arrested for speaking truth," Dolly said, accepting the coffee Clara offered. "Said I was drunk and disorderly. Me, I haven't had a drop all day." "What happened?" Clara asked. "She came in asking about you two, wanting to know how long you'd been married, where you came from, what kind of woman would work in a stable." Dolly's eyes flashed. "I told her you were worth 10 painted city women. She didn't like that." "Sheriff let her go," Reed added. "But Josephine's not happy. She'll make more trouble." "Why?" Clara asked. "What does she want?" Reed and Dolly exchanged glances. "You really don't see it," Dolly said gently. "She wants him back. The land story's just an excuse. She heard he was out here, maybe heard he was doing well with the stage line, and came to stake her claim." "I'm not a claim to be staked," Reed said sharply. "No, but you're a man who loved her once, and women like that don't like losing." Dolly stood. "Watch your back, both of you. She's got money and spite. Dangerous combination." After Dolly left, Clara and Reed prepared for bed in unusual silence. At her door, they still kept separate rooms. Reed paused. "I won't work for her. The surveying job." "You should," Clara said, surprising herself. "Take the job. Show her you're not affected by her presence, that you've moved on." "Have I?" The question seemed directed at himself as much as her. "Sometimes I think I'm still that broken man who ran west. Then I look at you and think maybe I'm becoming someone else." Clara touched his face gently. "You are someone else. Someone better. Don't let her make you forget that." He caught her hand, pressing it against his cheek. "What did I do to deserve you?" "Offered a desperate woman shelter," Clara said lightly, though her heart raced at his touch. "The rest we're figuring out as we go. Remember?" "I remember." He turned his head, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Good night, Clara." She lay awake long after, palm tingling where his lips had touched. Through the wall, she could hear him moving restlessly, equally unable to sleep. Josephine Aldridge had come to Ash Bluff like a perfectly dressed storm, bringing echoes of Reed's past and threats to their fragile present. But Clara had weathered storms before. She'd stood up to gossiping townswomen and survived nights in a stable loft. She could handle one elegant widow with designs on her husband. Her husband. The word still felt new but right. Whatever Josephine had been to Reed, Clara was his wife now, his partner, the woman who hauled water and served beans and made him smile when he thought no one was looking. It would have to be enough. She would make it enough. Outside, wind rattled the windows, another storm coming. Clara pulled the quilts higher and tried not to think about Josephine's perfect smile, her casual touch on Reed's arm, the history that lived in the space between them. Instead, she thought about Reed's lips on her palm, the way he'd said she made him want to be better, the simple truth in his voice when he'd said, "I'm not free." No, he wasn't free. He was hers, bound by law and growing affection and shared work. Josephine might have the past, but Clara had the present, and if she was brave enough, smart enough, strong enough, she'd have the future too. The storm hit just before dawn, but Clara slept through it, her dreams full of elegant women who dissolved like smoke when faced with water buckets and honest work. When she woke, snow was falling soft and clean, covering the muddy yard in pristine white. A new day, a clean slate, and somewhere in town, a widow who would learn that some claims, once abandoned, could never be restaked. Clara woke to the acrid smell of smoke and the sound of horses screaming. She was out of bed and pulling on her wrapper before her mind fully registered what was happening. Through her window, she could see orange light dancing across the stable walls. Fire. "Reed!" She burst from her room to find him already dressed, yanking on his boots. "Stay here," he ordered. But she was already reaching for her own shoes. "The horses. I'll get 'em. You ring the fire bell. Wake the town." They ran out together into chaos. Flames licked up the north wall of the stable, the one Reed had just repaired. The horses were wild with terror, kicking at their stall doors. Clara ran for the bell while Reed plunged into the smoke-filled barn. The bell's bronze voice rang out over Ash Bluff, urgent and demanding. Within minutes, men appeared, some still in nightshirts, carrying buckets. A line formed from the pump to the stable as Reed led horses out one by one, his face blackened with soot. Clara didn't wait for orders. She grabbed lead ropes and helped guide the terrified animals to safety in the corral. Her nightgown caught on something, tearing, but she didn't stop. A bay mare reared, nearly striking her, but she held tight to the rope, speaking calmly until the animal followed her out. "That's all of them," Reed gasped. Emerging with the last horse, blood ran down his arm where something had cut him. "You're hurt." Later, he joined the bucket brigade, and Clara fell in beside him. Her hands, already rough from work, blistered from the rope handles, but she kept passing buckets. The whole town seemed to be there, even Mrs. Pruitt worked alongside them, her usual propriety forgotten in the crisis. It took an hour to control the blaze. When the last flames died, leaving the north wall a blackened skeleton, everyone stood panting in the dawn light. The stable still stood, but barely. "Could have been worse," Mayor Harrison said, wiping soot from his face. "If you hadn't woken when you did." Reed was examining the burned section, his expression grim. This wasn't an accident. "What do you mean?" The mayor moved closer. Reed pointed to the ground near the wall. "Smell that kerosene. And look." He indicated a pile of oil-soaked rags, partially burned. "Someone set this." A murmur ran through the crowd. Sheriff Watson pushed forward. "That's a serious accusation. Kerrigan." "It's a serious crime." Reed's voice was steel. "Someone tried to burn us out. Could have killed the horses. Could have killed us." Clara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the heat still radiating from the charred wood. Who would do such a thing? Her mind went immediately to Josephine. But surely not. Spite was one thing, but attempted murder. "I'll investigate," Watson promised. "Everyone should go home, get some rest. Reed, you and your wife need somewhere to stay tonight." "We're staying here," Reed said flatly. "Someone needs to watch the horses." The crowd gradually dispersed, many offering help rebuilding. Dolly pressed Clara's hand before leaving. "You be careful, honey. This feels targeted." When they were alone, Clara finally got a good look at Reed's injury. A deep gash ran along his forearm, still bleeding freely. "Inside," she ordered. "That needs cleaning." He followed without argument, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. Clara heated water and gathered clean cloths, her governess training in basic medical care serving her now. "This might hurt," she warned, beginning to clean the wound. Reed didn't flinch. "You did good out there, with the horses." "I had a good teacher." She focused on her work, trying not to think about how close they'd come to losing everything. "Reed, who would do this?" "I don't know. Josephine arrived, and 3 days later our stable burns. That's quite a coincidence." "She's many things, but I can't see her setting fires. Too messy for her tastes." He winced as Clara applied carbolic. "Besides, what would she gain if she wants me back? Burning my livelihood seems counterproductive." Clara wrapped his arm with steady hands. "Unless she wanted to prove you need her money, create a crisis, then offer to solve it." Reed caught her hand. "You're shaking." "She was..." The morning's terror was catching up with her. We could have died. The horses could have died. Everything we've built. Hey, he pulled her close with his good arm. We're all right. The horses are safe. The stable can be rebuilt. Clara let herself lean into him, breathing in the smell of smoke and sweat and safety. I'm not used to being targeted, dismissed, yes, gossiped about. Certainly, but this... I know. His hand stroked her back. I'm sorry. Being associated with me has brought you nothing but trouble. She pulled back to look at him. Don't you dare. Don't you dare apologize for giving me a home, work, purpose, for marrying me when you didn't have to. Clara. No. She stood, pacing. Someone tried to hurt us, to destroy what we've built. And you know what? They failed. We saved every horse. The town came together to help us. Whatever they hoped to accomplish, they didn't succeed. Reed watched her with something like wonder. You're fierce when you're angry. I'm fierce when someone threatens what's mine. The words came out more possessive than she'd intended. The stable, the horses, you. Yours. His voice was soft. Heat flooded her cheeks. I know what you mean. He stood, crossing to her. And you're right. This is ours to protect. Together. A knock interrupted whatever might have come next. Reed opened the door to find Banker Pruitt, of all people, hat literally in hand. Kerrigan, Mrs. Kerrigan. He nodded awkwardly. I've come to... That is, my wife sent me to... Spit it out. Pruitt. We want to help. With the rebuilding. My wife was impressed by how Mrs. Kerrigan worked this morning. Said perhaps she'd misjudged. He shifted uncomfortably. I can extend a loan, reasonable terms, for materials and labor. Clara and Reed exchanged glances. Mrs. Pruitt. Impressed. It seemed the fire had shifted more than timber. We appreciate the offer, Reed said carefully. We'll consider it. After Pruitt left, they found more visitors arriving. Tom Chen from the laundry brought rice and preserved vegetables. For strength, he said simply. The schoolteacher, Miss Barrett, offered to help with the horses while they rebuilt. Even some of the miners stopped by with offers of labor. Seems disaster brings out the best in folks, Reed observed as the afternoon wore on. Or the worst, Clara countered, thinking of whoever had set the fire. Sheriff Watson returned near sunset, his expression troubled. Found something you should see. He led them to the burned section of the stable, pointing to marks in the mud. Boot prints, small ones. And this, he held up a scrap of fabric caught on a nail. Fine wool, dyed an expensive shade of green. Clara's heart sank. She'd seen that exact shade recently. Josephine wore a green cloak when she visited. Watson nodded grimly. I'll need to question her. This is evidence, but not proof. Could be coincidence. Lot of coincidences lately, Reed muttered. After Watson left, Clara and Reed worked side by side, settling the horses for the night. The animals were still skittish, requiring extra attention. Clara found herself watching Reed, noting the careful way he moved around his injury, the gentle patience he showed with each frightened animal. You're staring, he said without looking up from the mare he was grooming. Thinking about how you could have had any woman in Ohio before the war. Probably after, too, if you'd stayed. He did look at her then. I didn't want any woman. You wanted Josephine. I wanted who I thought she was. There's a difference. He set down the brush. Clara, what's this about? I'm trying to understand. She's beautiful, accomplished, everything a man could want. She left me. The words were simple, but they carried weight. When I needed her most, when I had nothing left but grief and nightmares. She left, married another man for his money and position. You think I could want someone capable of that? People do desperate things when they're afraid. You didn't. He stepped closer. You were stranded, penniless, reputation in ruins. You could have taken easier paths. Dolly even suggested one. But you chose to work, to endure gossip and hardship rather than compromise yourself. I compromised plenty. I married you for security. Did you? His hand cupped her cheek. Is that really why? Clara couldn't answer. The truth was too new, too fragile. Instead, she turned her face into his palm, pressing her lips to the calluses there. Clara! Her name was a question and a plea. Before she could respond, they heard horses approaching fast. Reed stepped outside, hand moving instinctively to where a weapon might hang, but it was only Sheriff Watson, returning with urgent news. Mrs. Aldridge is gone, he announced. Left on the evening stage. Hotel says she paid her bill and lit out like the devil was after her. Guilty conscience, Clara suggested. Maybe someone warned her I was coming with questions. Watson spat tobacco juice. Either way, she's beyond my reach now. Sorry, folks. Without her here to question. We understand. Reed said, thank you for trying. After Watson left, they stood in the damaged stable, processing this development. Josephine fled like a thief in the night. It seemed to confirm her guilt, but they'd likely never know for certain. It's over then, Clara said. The fire's over. The rebuilding's just beginning. Reed looked at the damaged wall. We'll need help, lumber, labor. We'll have it. You saw today the town will help. Because of you, he smiled slightly. The proper governess who fights fires in her nightgown. You've won them over. I tore my nightgown, my only good one. I'll buy you another. The promise was casual, husbandly. It warmed her more than grand gestures might have. They secured the stable as best they could, Reed rigging a temporary barrier over the damaged section. As they worked, Clara found herself thinking about the day's events, the terror of waking to fire, the town's response, Josephine's flight, Reed's steady presence through it all. I'm glad you're here, Reed said suddenly, not just for the work, for this facing it together. Where else would I be? Anywhere safer, teaching some judge's children in Santa Fe, married to a clerk or shopkeeper who'd never attract mysterious fires. Clara considered this. Sounds dull. Dull. He laughed, short and genuine. Most women prefer dull to dangerous. I'm not most women. No. He looked at her with an expression that made her breath catch. You're not. They finished the evening chores in companionable silence. Despite everything, the fire, the fear, the uncertainty, Clara felt oddly at peace. This was her life now, dangerous sometimes, difficult often, but real in ways her old existence had never been. As they prepared for bed, Reed paused at her door again. It had become their ritual, these moments of almost, "Thank you," he said, "for staying, for fighting beside me, for being fierce," she supplied with a small smile. Essential. The word hung between them, weighted with meaning. Clara reached up, touching his face as he'd touched hers earlier. We're partners. Remember, in all things. All things, he repeated softly. She went up on her toes and kissed his cheek, lips brushing the corner of his mouth. Good night, Reed. Inside her room, she heard him stand there for a long moment before his footsteps moved away. Clara changed into her torn nightgown. She'd need to mend it tomorrow, and climbed into bed. Through her window, she could see stars appearing in the clear sky. The air still smelled of smoke, but beneath it was the promise of snow. Winter wasn't finished with them yet, but they'd survived fire. They could survive cold. Tomorrow would bring questions about rebuilding, about Josephine's guilt, about their future. But tonight, Clara Kerrigan closed her eyes and dreamed not of flames, but of steady hands and promises spoken in darkness, of partnerships forged in crisis and something deeper growing in the space between almost and yes. The stable stood wounded but whole. Their marriage stood tested but stronger. And somewhere between fighting fire and facing the future, Clara had stopped thinking of Reed as her employer, her protector, her unexpected husband, and started thinking of him as simply hers. It was enough. For tonight, it was everything. The acrid smell still lingered 3 days after the fire, a constant reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. Clara worked beside Reed and the hired men, clearing debris and salvaging what they could. Her hands, already rough from stable work, were now marked with splinters and burns from handling charred wood. "So, Mrs. Kerrigan, you shouldn't be doing such heavy work," Tom Morrison, one of the miners helping with repairs, said as she hefted another blackened beam. "Why? Because I'm a woman." Clara didn't pause in her efforts. "Because you're a lady," he corrected, then grinned. "Though I'm learning that don't mean much to you. It means exactly as much as I choose it to mean." She deposited the beam on the growing pile. "Which today is nothing." Reed looked up from where he was examining the remaining wall structure. "Since the fire." He'd been quieter than usual, watchful in a way that spoke of expecting more trouble. The cut on his arm was healing, but Clara had seen him favoring it. "Frames still sound," he announced. "We can rebuild on it." "That's good news," Clara said, wiping sweat from her brow despite the cold. "The lumber from Baker's Mill should arrive tomorrow." "About that." Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "There's been talk in town. Some folks are saying maybe the fire was a warning, that perhaps certain people aren't wanted here." Reed straightened slowly. "Certain people meaning my wife?" "Now, I ain't saying I agree." "Then why are you saying it at all?" Reed's voice carried an edge Clara had rarely heard. Morrison backed up a step. "Just thought you should know. Josephine Aldridge has friends in town. Rich friends. They're not happy about her leaving under a cloud of suspicion." "She left because she's guilty," Clara said flatly. "Maybe, but without proof." Morrison shrugged. "Rich folks tend to stick together." After he left to continue working on the other side of the stable, Reed moved closer to Clara. "He's not wrong. There's been more talk since Josephine left." "Let them talk." Clara attacked another beam with perhaps more force than necessary. "We have work to do." "Clara." "No." She turned to face him. "I won't be driven out by gossip. We've come too far for that." Reed studied her face, then nodded. "All right, but stay close to the stable. Don't go into town alone." It was a reasonable precaution, but it chafed. Clara had just won some acceptance, only to have it threatened again by forces beyond her control. The morning's work continued, punctuated by the arrival of Miss Barrett with a basket of food. The schoolteacher had been coming daily, bringing meals and offering quiet support. "How are you managing?" she asked Clara as they set out lunch for the workers. "We're surviving." Clara poured coffee, her movements automatic. "The stable will be better than before when we're done." "I didn't mean the stable." Miss Barrett's voice was gentle. "I meant you. This can't be easy. Having your home attacked, your safety threatened." Clara's hands stilled. Home. When had she started thinking of this place as home? "It's harder on Reed," she deflected. "He built this place. I'm just—" His wife. His partner. "Don't diminish your place here." Miss Barrett accepted the cup Clara offered. "I've watched you these past weeks. You've brought something to this stable, to him, that wasn't here before. Trouble, apparently. Life." The teacher's smile was knowing. "I've known Reed Kerrigan for 3 years. Never seen him as alive as he's been since you arrived." Before Clara could respond, they heard raised voices from the stable. Reed was facing down 3 well-dressed men Clara recognized as business owners from town. Completely unfounded accusations against Mrs. Aldridge. One was saying, "She's withdrawn her business interests from the region entirely because of this slander." "No one slandered anyone," Reed replied evenly. The sheriff investigated based on evidence. Evidence that mysteriously appeared just when your wife needed sympathy. The speaker, Mr. Garrett, who owned the largest hotel, sneered. Convenient. Wasn't it poor brave woman fighting the fire, earning the town's respect? Almost like it was planned. Clara stepped forward, but Reed held up a hand, stopping her. Are you accusing my wife of setting fire to her own home? I'm saying it's suspicious. She arrives in town under questionable circumstances, maneuvers you into marriage, and suddenly there's drama that paints her as a victim and a respectable widow as a villain. Get off my property. Reed's voice was deadly quiet. We're not finished. Yes, you are. Reed stepped closer to Garrett. You can leave now, or I can help you leave. Your choice. The men retreated, but Garrett called back. This isn't over. Kerrigan, some of us remember what this town was like before certain elements arrived. After they left, the yard fell silent. The workers had all stopped to watch the confrontation. Reed stood rigid, hands clenched. Back to work, he said roughly. We've got daylight to use. The men dispersed, but Clara saw the looks they exchanged. More gossip to spread. More fuel for the fire of rumor. She approached Reed carefully. You shouldn't have what defended my wife. He turned to her, eyes blazing. They can say what they want about me, but not about you, never about you. The vehemence in his voice made her throat tight. Reed. No, you've endured enough. Gossip, suspicion, working yourself raw beside me. And now they dare suggest you'd burn your own home for sympathy. He pulled her against him suddenly, ignoring the watching workers. I won't stand for it. Clara let herself be held, feeling the tension in his body. It's all right. Words can't hurt us. Can't they? He pulled back to look at her. Words drove you from position after position. Words nearly got Dolly arrested. Words can destroy lives as surely as fire. He was right. But what choice did they have? Then what do? We prove them wrong. We rebuild. We thrive. We show them that their suspicions mean nothing. His hands framed her face. And we stop pretending. Pretending that this marriage is just convenience. That we're just partners in business. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. I'm tired of sleeping apart. Tired of careful distance. Tired of almost. Clara's heart pounded. Reed, the men are watching. Let them. But he released her, stepping back. Tonight, we talk tonight. The rest of the day passed in a blur of work and worried glances. The workers seemed unsettled by the morning's confrontation, and several left early. By evening, only Clara and Reed remained, surveying the day's progress. We'll need more help, Clara observed. If Garrett's faction is spreading poison, workers might be scarce. We'll manage. Reed secured the temporary wall they'd erected. We always do. They ate a simple supper in the office, the silence heavy with unspoken words. Finally, as Clara cleared the dishes, Reed spoke. I meant what I said earlier about being tired of pretending. Clara's hand stilled. I know. Do you feel the same? She turned to face him. This man who'd offered her shelter without conditions, who'd married her to save her reputation, who defended her against anyone who dared disparage her, who looked at her now with careful hope. Yes, she whispered. He was across the room in 2 strides, pulling her close. This kiss was nothing like their wedding day's brief touch. This was hunger and promise and weeks of careful distance exploding into need. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Reed rested his forehead against hers. I don't know how to be a husband, not a real one. The war, it broke parts of me I'm still finding. We'll figure it out as we go. Clara echoed their old refrain, together, together. He kissed her again, softer this time. Your room or mine? Heat flooded her cheeks. But she met his eyes steadily. Yours is bigger. His laugh was shaky, practical to the end. Would you have me any other way? Never. He took her hand. Come on, Mrs. Kerrigan, let's stop pretending. Later, lying in Reed's bed, their bed now, Clara traced the scars on his chest by lamplight. Each mark a story of survival, of a life that had led him here. To her. No regrets? He asked softly. None. She pressed a kiss to a particularly jagged scar over his ribs. Only that we waited so long. His hand tangled in her hair, loosened from its usual practical braid. Clara, I need you to know what we have. It might not look like what others have. I might not say the right things, or... She silenced him with a kiss. I don't need pretty words. Reed, I need truth. I need partnership. I need you, exactly as you are. You have me, he said simply. All of me. They lay quietly, listening to the wind outside. The stable might be damaged. The town might gossip. Wealthy men might scheme against them. But here in this bed, in this moment, they were complete. We should check the horses, Clara said eventually, though she made no move to rise. In a minute. Reed pulled her closer. Let me be selfish for once. You're never selfish. I am now, keeping you here when there's work to be done. His lips brushed her temple. My fierce, practical, beautiful wife. Flattery will not excuse you from evening chores. What about bribery? He rolled her beneath him, eyes dancing with a lightness she'd never seen before. I could be convinced to check the horses myself if properly motivated. Oh, and what would proper motivation entail? He showed her, and the horses had to wait a bit longer. Eventually, duty called them from bed. They dressed and went to tend the animals together, moving with new ease around each other. The horses seemed calmer, as if sensing the shift in their caretaker's relationship. As they worked, Clara thought about the day's challenges. Garrett and his allies wouldn't give up easily. The fire might have been Josephine's parting shot, but the battle for acceptance was far from over. You're thinking too loud, Reed observed, filling water buckets. Planning, strategizing. We need allies of our own. We have some Morrison, despite his warnings. Miss Barrett, Dolly, the Chens. It's not enough, not if the wealthy merchants unite against us. Clara paused in brushing a mare. We need to make ourselves indispensable to the town, too valuable to drive out. What did you have in mind? The stage line contract is up for renewal soon. Isn't it what if we expanded offered mail delivery to the mining camps? Freight services for the smaller merchants who can't afford Garrett's prices? Reed considered. Would mean more work, more horses, more risk. More opportunity. She met his eyes across the stall. We can't just survive. Reed, we need to thrive. Show them we belong here. All right, he said slowly. Draw up a proposal. We'll present it to the stage company next month. They finished the evening chores and returned to the office. But instead of separating as they had for weeks, they climbed the stairs together. At the door to Reed's room, their room, he paused. Thank you, he said. For what? For not giving up when things got hard, for seeing possibility where others see only problems, for choosing this life, choosing me, when you could have had easier paths. Clara reached up to touch his face, still marveling that she could do so freely now. There were no easier paths, not for someone like me, too proud, too stubborn, too much of everything improper. She smiled. Besides, easy sounds dull. And you're never dull. He turned his head to kiss her palm, as was becoming his habit. Come to bed, wife. Such romance, she teased, but followed willingly. As they settled into sleep, Clara thought about the morning's confrontation, the threats and suspicions that swirled around them. Tomorrow would bring more challenges. The stable needed rebuilding. The town needed convincing. Their future needed securing. But tonight, she lay in her husband's arms, safe and wanted and home. The girl who'd stepped off the stagecoach weeks ago, desperate and alone, would never have imagined this. That Clara had wanted position, respectability, the things she'd been taught to value. This Clara Mrs. Reed Kerrigan, stable owner's wife, fighter of fires and gossip alike, wanted different things: partnership, purpose, the freedom to be herself without apology. And the man sleeping beside her, scarred and steady, and hers. The fire had tested them. The town would continue to test them. But they'd proven something in the ashes and aftermath together. They were stronger than anyone had imagined. Let Garrett and his allies scheme. Let the gossips whisper. Clara and Reed would rebuild their stable and their life, one board and one day at a time. And when the dust settled, they'd still be standing. Together, always together. That was their real strength. The foundation no fire could burn, not passion, though that was there now. Burning bright. Not convenience or necessity or any of the reasons they'd first given, but choice. Every day, they chose each other, chose this life they were building. And that was worth more than all the approval in the world. The town hall was packed to the rafters, the air thick with tobacco smoke and tension. Clara sat beside Reed in the front row, her back straight despite the hostile stares burning into them from all directions. The emergency council meeting had been called by Garrett and his faction, ostensibly to discuss public safety concerns regarding the stable. Mayor Harrison gavelled the meeting to order, his discomfort obvious. "We're here to address the recent incidents at the Kerrigan stable and their impact on our community." Impact? Clara stood before Reed could stop her. "You mean the impact of someone trying to burn us out? Or the impact of citizens rallying to help their neighbors?" "You're out of order, Mrs. Kerrigan," Garrett said smoothly from his seat among the council members. "This is a council meeting. You haven't been recognized to speak." "Then I ask to be recognized." Clara's voice carried clear and strong. "Unless this council makes decisions about citizens' livelihoods without allowing them to defend themselves." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mayor Harrison looked desperately at Garrett, then at Reed, who had risen to stand beside his wife. "The floor recognizes Mrs. Kerrigan," the mayor said weakly. Clara stepped forward. 3 weeks ago, someone set fire to our stable. The evidence pointed to a specific individual who fled rather than face questions. Since then, certain members of this community have suggested that my husband and I somehow orchestrated this attack on our own property and livelihood. I'd like to know on what grounds. On the grounds that you're an outsider who arrived under suspicious circumstances. Mrs. Pruitt called from the audience. "Taking advantage of a good man's kindness, inserting yourself where you don't belong." "I arrived seeking employment that had been falsely offered," Clara replied calmly. "I accepted honest work when my situation became desperate. I married my husband in full view of this community, with Reverend Mills officiating. Where exactly is the crime in that?" "The crime," Garrett stood, "is in the disruption you've brought, fires, violence, discord among neighbors who previously lived in harmony. The only discord I see comes from those who cannot accept a woman working alongside her husband." Clara's eyes swept the room. "Tell me, Mr. Garrett, when the fire threatened to spread to neighboring buildings, who formed the bucket brigade when the horses were in danger? Who risked their lives to save them?" "Theatrics," someone muttered. "Facts," Clara countered. "And here's another fact: my husband's stable provides an essential service to this town, the stage line, mail delivery, transport for goods. Will you disrupt all of that because you disapprove of his choice in wives?" Reed stepped forward then. "Enough. You want to attack someone. Attack me. Leave my wife out of it." "Your wife inserted herself into this situation," Garrett sneered. "A proper woman would have—" "Would have what?" Dolly's voice rang out from the back of the room. She pushed through the crowd, dressed more conservatively than usual, but with her chin high. Starved quietly, accepted charity, sold herself in more approved ways. Shocked gasps met this statement. Dolly kept coming until she stood beside Clara. "I may not be respectable by your standards," Dolly continued, "but I know something about survival. Clara Kerrigan chose honest work over easier paths. That makes her more respectable than those who destroy her for it." "A saloon girl defending her," Mrs. Pruitt sniffed. "That says everything." "It does." Miss Barrett stood in the middle of the room. "It says that women who work for their living recognize integrity when they see it." The schoolteacher moved to join Clara and Dolly. "I've watched Mrs. Kerrigan these past weeks. She works harder than most men, treats everyone with dignity, and has brought nothing but improvement to her husband's business." "Improvement?" Garrett laughed harshly. "The place nearly burned down. Through no fault of theirs." A new voice interjected. Tom Morrison stood, several minors rising with him. "We've been talking, the boys and me. That fire was set deliberate, and we all know it. Question is, why are you so eager to blame the victims?" The tide was turning. Clara could feel it in the shifting energy of the room. More people stood the chens from the laundry, several small merchants, even some of the mothers whose children attended Miss Barrett's school. "Furthermore," Morrison continued, "we've been discussing who benefits from driving out the Kerrigans. Seems to me, Mr. Garrett, you've had your eye on that stable location for a while. Prime real estate for expanding your hotel, isn't it?" Garrett's face flushed. "That's a baseless accusation." "No more baseless than yours against Mrs. Kerrigan," Reed said quietly. His calm was more threatening than shouting would have been. "Difference is, I have proof." He pulled papers from his coat. "Offers to buy my land, dated 2 months ago, before Clara even arrived. All from your business partners. Garrett." The crowd stirred restlessly. Mayor Harrison pounded his gavel. "Order, Mr. Kerrigan. Are you suggesting—" "I'm stating facts. You wanted my land. I wouldn't sell. Suddenly, my stable's on fire and my wife's character is under attack." Reed's eyes never left Garrett. "Coincidence?" "You can't prove anything," Garrett sputtered. "Neither can you," Clara said. "Yet here we are, defending ourselves against shadows and suppositions." She addressed the room at large. "Look at what's happening here. Neighbor against neighbor. Suspicion and rumor given weight of law. Is this the town you want to live in?" An old man Clara recognized as a longtime resident stood slowly. "Girl's got a point. I've lived here 20 years. Seen plenty of folks come and go. These two," he gestured at Clara and Reed, "they work hard, mind their business, help when needed. That's all I need to know." "Here, here," several voices called. Mrs. Pruitt stood, face pinched with displeasure. "This is all very touching, but the fact remains that standards must be maintained. We cannot simply—" "Cannot simply what?" Clara interrupted. "Cannot accept that a woman might choose work over charity. Cannot believe that a marriage born of practical need might grow into something real." She took Reed's hand publicly, feeling him squeeze back. "Cannot admit that your prejudices matter less than people's actions." "Well said." Reverend Mills moved to the front of the room. "I've been silent too long, letting gossip poison our community. I married these two. I've watched them build something together. If that threatens you, perhaps you should examine why." The meeting devolved into arguments, neighbors debating neighbors, old alliances shifting. Through it all, Clara stood with Reed's hand in hers, surrounded by unexpected allies. Finally, Mayor Harrison called for order. "Mr. Garrett, do you have any actual evidence of wrongdoing by the Kerrigans?" Garrett's jaw worked. "No." "Then I see no cause for official action. Meeting dismissed." As people filed out, many stopped to shake Reed's hand or nod to Clara. The support wasn't universal. Garrett's faction left in a hostile cluster, but it was broader than she dared hope. Outside, their small group of defenders gathered. Dolly hugged Clara tightly. You did good in there, standing up like that. We all did, Clara replied, including Miss Barrett and the others. Thank you, all of you. Morrison spat tobacco juice thoughtfully. Garrett won't give up easy. Men like him don't like being shown up public-like. Let him try something, Reed said grimly. We'll be ready. As the group dispersed, Clara and Reed walked back to the stable. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant overhead. You were magnificent, Reed said softly, standing there, facing them down. I've never seen anything like it. I was terrified, Clara admitted, but also angry. How dare they judge us? How dare they try to tear down what we've built? That's my fierce wife. He stopped walking, turning to face her. Clara, when you took my hand in there, in front of everyone. Too much. Perfect. He cupped her face. I'm not good at public displays, but seeing you claim me like that. Claim you, she smiled. Is that what I did? Among other things. He kissed her there in the street, not caring who might see. Come home, Mrs. Kerrigan, let me claim you back. They barely made it to their room, hands and mouths desperate with the need to affirm life and connection after the night's confrontation. Later, tangled together in their bed, Clara traced lazy patterns on Reed's chest. Do you think it's over? She asked. With Garrett, no, but we showed the town we won't be pushed around. That counts for something. We have allies now, real ones. Thanks to you. He caught her hand, kissing her fingers. You gave them someone to rally around, the wronged woman standing strong. We gave them that. I couldn't have done it alone. No, he agreed. That's what makes us dangerous to men like Garrett. We're stronger together than apart. Clara settled against him, thinking about the night's events. She'd come to Ash Bluff seeking a governess position, a safe and respectable life. Instead, she'd found something entirely different, a partnership forged in hardship, a love built on mutual respect, a place in the world defended by her own strength and unexpected allies. No regrets, Reed asked, echoing his question from nights past. None, Clara said firmly. Whatever comes next, we'll face it. Together. Always together. Outside, wind rattled the windows. And somewhere in town, Garrett was probably plotting his next move. But in their bed, in their stable, in their life built from ashes and determination. Clara and Reed Kerrigan held each other and knew they'd already won the only battle that truly mattered. They'd chosen each other. They'd stood together. They'd refused to be broken. Everything else was just noise. Morning would come with its challenges. The stable still needed repairs. The business still needed building. The town still harbored those who wished them gone. But they'd weathered fire and gossip and public trial. They could weather whatever came next. Clara drifted towards sleep, Reed's heartbeat steady beneath her ear. Tomorrow, she'd wake beside him and face the world again. But tonight, she was simply a woman held by a man who'd defend her against any threat, as she would defend him. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It was better. It was real. It was theirs. And that was worth fighting for, today and all the days to come. In the stable below, horses shifted peacefully in their stalls. The building bore scars from the fire, but its bones were strong, like the marriage sheltered within its walls, tested by flame, strengthened by trial, built to last. Clara smiled against Reed's chest and let sleep take her, secure in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brought, she wouldn't face it alone. She had a husband, a home, a purpose, and a community that had finally seen her worth. More than enough for any woman. More than she'd ever dared dream. The rebuilt stable stood strong against the March wind, its fresh timber golden in the afternoon sun. Clara ran her hand along the new wall, remembering the charred ruins of just a month ago. They'd done it rebuilt better than before, with the help of neighbors who'd become friends and allies who'd emerged from unexpected places. Admiring our handiwork, Reed came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Our survival," she corrected, leaning back against him. "Our victory." "Speaking of which," he turned her to face him. "There's something I need to tell you. Garrett's left town." Clara's eyes widened. "What?" "Took the morning stage. Apparently, his business partners discovered some irregularities in his books. Seems our friend was skimming from the hotel profits." Reed's smile was grim but satisfied. Sheriff Watson suggested he might want to seek opportunities elsewhere before formal charges were filed. "He's really gone." "Really gone. His share of the hotel's been bought out by a consortium of smaller merchants, the ones who stood with us at the meeting." Reed cupped her face. "We're safe, Clara. Finally, truly safe." She kissed him hard, pouring her relief and joy into the connection. When they broke apart, both breathless, she saw Morrison approaching with a knowing grin. "Sorry to interrupt the celebration, but thought you'd want to know stage company accepted your proposal. Mail routes to the mining camps, freight service, the whole expansion plan." He handed Reed the contract. "Congratulations. You're about to be the busiest stable in 3 counties. Clara grabbed the papers, scanning them quickly. It was true everything they'd proposed had been approved. The income would triple, ensuring their security for years to come. "We'll need more horses," she said. "Already planning. More workers, too, and proper quarters for them." "That's my Clara," Reed laughed. "Can't even celebrate for a minute before planning the next step." "Your Clara has kept us solvent," she retorted, but she was smiling. "Someone has to think ahead." That evening, they hosted a celebration dinner. The stable's main floor had been cleared, tables borrowed from the church. Everyone who'd supported them was invited. Dolly in her finest dress, Miss Barrett with several of her students, the Chens with dishes of food Clara couldn't pronounce, but that smelled wonderful, Morrison and his miners, even Reverend Mills. "6 weeks ago, I was sleeping in that loft," Clara said to Dolly as they watched Reed demonstrate rope tricks for the children. "Alone, desperate, certain my life was over. Now look at you." Dolly raised her glass of cider. "Married to a good man, running a business, respected by folks that matter. You fought for it and won." "We all fought." Clara touched her friend's arm. "I'll never forget you standing up in that meeting. Us working girls got to stick together, remember?" Dolly winked. "Besides, I knew you were quality first time I saw you. Just took others longer to figure it out." As the evening progressed, Clara found herself watching Reed. He was different now, the careful distance he'd maintained for so long replaced by easy warmth. He laughed at Morrison's jokes, helped serve food, even danced with Miss Barrett when the miners brought out a fiddle. "You're staring," he said, appearing at her side as he had that first night. "Thinking about how that silent man who pointed to a stable loft has become this," she gestured at the scene. "Friends, laughter, community. You did this." "We did this." He pulled her into the dancing, clumsy but earnest. "I was just existing before you came, going through motions, hiding from life. You woke me up. Clara reminded me there were things worth fighting for." "Reed, I love you." The words came simple and certain. "Should have said it sooner. That night in the cabin, when you chose to stay. The morning you stood up to Mrs. Pruitt. Every day since. I love your strength, your stubbornness, the way you make lists when you're worried. I love..." She silenced him with a kiss, not caring about their audience. When they parted, she whispered, "I love you too. Have for weeks. Maybe since you handed me that lamp and said we'd figure it out as we go." "And have we figured it out?" Clara looked around the transformed stable, their home, their business, their life. "I think we have." The party continued late into the night, but eventually guests departed with warm farewells and promises to help with the expansion. Clara and Reed stood in their empty stable, surrounded by evidence of their new life dishes to wash, chairs to return, but also signed contracts and sincere friendships. It's quiet now, Reed observed. Too quiet. No, perfect. He lit a lamp, the flame casting familiar shadows. Clara, do you remember that first night I lit this same lamp and wondered what I'd gotten myself into, bringing a desperate governess to my stable? And I wondered if I'd finally fallen too far to recover. Clara moved closer to him. I was so frightened. Of the cold, the uncertainty, but mostly of hope. I'd been disappointed so many times. And now I'm grateful for the closed doors that led me here, for the fire that showed us who our friends were, for the gossips who forced us to stand together. She touched his face. For the taciturn stable owner who offered shelter to a stranger. Reed set down the lamp and drew her close. That first night, when I climbed up to check on you. Yes. I almost asked you to come down, to share the office where it was warmer, but I thought it would be improper. You were a lady, clearly educated, and I was just the man I was meant to find, Clara finished. Though neither of us knew it then. They stood in comfortable silence, remembering those first uncertain days. So much had changed. Yet the stable remained improved, but essentially the same safe haven it had been that snowy night. I have something for you, Reed said suddenly, producing a small package. Ordered it weeks ago, but with everything that happened. Clara unwrapped it carefully, gasping at what lay inside. A gold watch on a delicate chain, inscribed with her new initials, C. Reed, it's too much. It's not enough. Not for what you've brought to my life. He fastened it around her neck. But it's a start. There's an inscription inside. She opened the watch, reading the tiny words etched there, figured it out together. R. Oh, Reed. Tears pricked her eyes. It's perfect. You're perfect, my fierce, practical, wonderful wife. He kissed her softly, ready for bed. In a moment, Clara looked around the stable one more time. I just want to remember this. All of it. The night we truly won. We won the night you stayed, Reed said. Everything else was just details. They climbed the stairs to their room, not the cramped quarters off the office anymore, but a proper bedroom they'd added during the rebuilding. Clara changed into her nightgown, a new one to replace the torn one from the fire, and brushed out her hair. I was thinking, she said as Reed joined her in bed, about expansion plans. If we're running mail routes, we could also carry small packages, maybe even start a passenger service to the camps. Clara, he pulled her against him. No business talk in our bed, that's a rule. Since when? Since now. He kissed her neck. I have other plans for our time here. Oh, and what might those? He showed her, and business talk was forgotten for quite some time. Later, as dawn light crept through their window, Clara woke to find Reed watching her. No regrets, he asked. Their old ritual. One, she said, and his face fell until she continued. I regret it took so long to find you. Think of all the time we wasted. Not wasted, prepared. He traced her face gently. We both needed to become who we are before we could build this. She considered that. Clara the governess, proper and constrained, could never have fought for this life, and the Reed who'd hidden from the world couldn't have opened his heart to share it. They'd been forged by their separate trials into people who could choose each other. You're right, she said, as usual. I learned from the best. He pulled her close. My practical Clara, always seeing the truth of things. Your romantic Reed, finding beauty where others see only hardship. Are we really discussing our virtues at dawn? Would you prefer to discuss the feed order because I noticed we're running low on oats? He silenced her with a kiss that led to other things, and the feed order had to wait. When they finally rose, the day was bright and full of promise. Together they descended to begin the morning chores, working in easy harmony born of practice and partnership. As Clara filled water buckets, she noticed a familiar figure at the stable entrance, a tall woman in a simple traveling dress, clutching a worn valise. "Excuse me," the woman said hesitantly. "I'm looking for work. I heard, that is, someone in town said you might have positions available." Clara studied her, the too proud posture, the careful dignity masking desperation, the good dress showing signs of hard travel, like looking in a mirror from 2 months past. "We're expanding," Clara said gently. "What experience do you have?" "I was a teacher, but I can learn whatever's needed. I'm not afraid of hard work." Reed appeared, taking in the situation with a glance. He looked at Clara, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly. "We could use help with the mail routes," he said. "Someone educated, good with letters and figures, room and board included. Quarters aren't fancy." "I don't need fancy," the woman said quickly. "Just honest work and a fair chance." Clara smiled. "Then you've come to the right place. I'm Clara Carrigan, and this is my husband Reed. What's your name?" Sarah Winters." "Well, Miss Winters, let me show you around. The work's hard. The town can be difficult. But if you're willing to fight for your place here—" "I am," Sarah said firmly. As Clara led their new employee into the stable, she caught Reed's smile, another lost soul seeking shelter, another chance to pass on the kindness they'd received. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Weren't you sure about me?" "Best decision I ever made." "Then trust me." Clara squeezed his hand. "We know how to build something from nothing. We can teach her." "All right." He lifted their joined hands to his lips. "But if she burns the biscuits, you're teaching her to cook." "Deal." They entered the stable together, ready to extend the sanctuary that had saved them both. The morning sun streamed through the doors, illuminating fresh timber and new possibilities. Clara touched the watch at her throat, feeling its steady tick. Time moving forward, carrying them toward a future they'd build day by day, choice by choice, together, always together. Behind them, Sarah Winters picked up her valise and followed, stepping from desperation into hope. The cycle continued, the stable remained, and love unexpected, hard-won, unshakable, made even the simplest moments shine. Reed lit a lamp in the dim corner where they'd show Sarah her quarters, then turned to Clara. "If you're sure this is your first night," he said to the new arrival, echoing words from another time, another chance taken. Clara smiled, remembering her own first night, the fear and hope and beginning of everything. Now she stood on the other side of that moment, ready to offer what had been offered to her. A chance, a choice, a home. The lamp glowed warm in Reed's hands as they climbed the ladder to show Sarah the loft. And Clara knew with bone-deep certainty that every difficult step had been worth it to reach this moment, this life, this love that had grown from the ashes of their separate griefs into something beautiful and strong and theirs. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed following Clara and Reed's journey as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please leave a comment below, and let's connect over our shared love of these frontier tales. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like, and hit that hype button to help more people discover these tales of love and courage in the American frontier. Your support means the world and helps me continue bringing these stories to life. Until next time, partners.